subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Synopsis. Suddenly, a peculiar little shop called Mystery Hatchery House appeared on the seas. Inside were all sorts of eggs, along with magical creatures that seemed as if they had eaten devil fruits. They were called Pokémon. As time passed, this shop gradually became famous worldwide. The world's strongest man, Whitebeard, was constantly sending children to Pokémon Academy for schooling. Garp not only beat up his grandson all the time, but also became one of the Elite Four. The Pirate Empress became one of the 8 gym leaders of the Pokémon League. The aloof Mihawk was driven to the brink of collapse by his own Pokémon every day. The Navy established a special operations unit called the Trainer Corps to eradicate pirates across the seas. The Beast Pirates, green with envy, transformed into a rocket team, snatching Pokémon wherever they went. The ripples caused by these magical little fellows in the great seas didn't matter to Dak at all, because he was just an ordinary breeder. Alright, it's about time to start the first Pokémon tournament. Everyone, please head to the 8 Pokémon gyms around the world to collect badges first. Everyone, the times have changed. The Pirate King is a thing of the past. Please strive towards the goal of becoming a Pokémon Master. 1. Chapter 1, P.S. The timeline of this work is that Roger died in the year 1498, which means Luffy set out to sea in the year 1520. Enjoy. Host consciousness gradually recovering. Breeder Master System activating. Creating the Void Shop. Creating the Void Rules. Creating the Void Channel. Creating. Dak, feeling a buzzing in his mind and a splitting headache, covers his head and opens his eyes. He seems to be lying on a lawn, with the sound of flowing water nearby. As his vision gradually returns, he sees a pure white ceiling adorned with a few clouds, and in the center, an orange-yellow warm light like the sun. Creation complete. As the headache in his mind gradually subsides, Dak finally takes a good look around. Where is this? He's in a sealed cubic space, 10 meters in length, width, and height, making it not too big at only 100 square meters of movable space. The floor is a lawn. Dak plucks a blade of grass. It's real, with soil underneath, but the sky painted on the ceiling is fake. To the west is a lush, fragrant bush about 2 to 3 meters tall. To the east is a small lake with a radius of 1 meter and a depth of about 2 meters, crystal clear with a small fountain in the center. Its source unknown. The temperature inside the space is comfortable, slightly warm, likely due to the warmth emitted by the lamp on the ceiling. Besides that, there's nothing else in the room. Dak is still trying to wrap his head around his current situation. He only remembers playing basketball and fainting during a 3-point fadeaway shot before waking up here. Did he cross over to another world? System. He seems to have heard something about a system starting up during his fuzzy consciousness. So Dak softly calls out to his surroundings. Breeder Master System at your service. Currently loaded functions. Magical Shop, Magical Roulette, Magical Market, Mission System, Blacklist, Pocket Token, Magical Portal. Main Mission released. Main Mission 1. Grand Opening. Task. Open the shop. Welcome guests. Reward. Supreme Luxury Newbie Gift Pack. Wait, what shop? Dak is utterly confused. This system aims to train the host to become the #1 Pokémon breeder across all realms. The Magical Shop is a breeding house belonging to the host, where you can sell the Pokémon eggs or Pokémon you bred, as well as offer Pokémon-related services to customers. The Magical Shop is located in a void space, containing rules constructed from the void. External attacks cannot enter the shop, and the strength of all guests entering the shop will be suppressed to the same level as a Totodile. Totodile? Which Totodile? How strong? Dak frowns, wary in his eyes. At your current level, polite but not much. Dak purses his lips, recalling the system's mentioned features. Some of them he understands just from the names, having read similar novels before, but he's curious about the last two. What are Pocket Token and Magical Portal about? Magical Portal. The space outside the shop is constantly changing. Nobody in the main world knows if opening a door will lead them into the shop. This is to prevent the host from being frequently disturbed in the future. Pocket token. Guests holding this token can enter the shop from anywhere by opening a door, recommended to be given to regular customers. So, I want to know where I'll end up if I go out. Dak pauses. What if he steps in a lava when going out? You can specify any coordinate in the current world that you visited before. If not specified, the destination is random. For guests, they return to where they came from. What if I want to come back? Do I need that token too? As the shopkeeper, you can open a door at any time and decide whether to return to the shop. Not all realms. What does current world mean? The shop is currently in its initial stages and lacks the conditions to link to other worlds. It can only operate in the current world. Current world, One Piece. One Piece, Dak nods, pondering. The world of One Piece is not too safe, but still manageable among all the realms. At least, Dak is relatively clear about the timeline and powers within One Piece. If he ended up in worlds like the Three-Body Problem or Warhammer, he'd choose to end it on the spot. One Piece, at least, has potential, and the difficulty isn't too high. What year is it in the Sea Circle calendar? Checking. Sea Circle calendar year 1511. Dak sits cross-legged, trying to recall the current world situation. The year 1511 in the Sea Circle calendar is relatively stable, with no major event happening. A good time for opening a business and accumulating strength. By contrast, 1512 will see many events. Accumulating strength now will allow for more actions later. The situation at sea has gradually stabilized, with the three great powers dividing the New World and the structure of the Navy with one admiral and three generals being stable. Over the next few years, the only things that might shake the world are changes in the seven warlords of the sea and the revelation of the Revolutionary Army leader Dragon. The timing is good. Let's open for business. Dak nods. Linking to the Void channel. Link complete. Please name your shop. Magical Breeding House. Sound perv. Name set. Shop open. With a notification, a quaint, deep brown wooden door suddenly appears on the wall behind Dak. Main mission completed. Newbie gift pack delivered. Ability acquired. Conqueror's Hockey LV.10. Security. Darkrai LV.100. Received. Pokémon Egg X10. Received. Breeder Book for Novice to Master X1. Help me organize a personal panel. Dak, feeling overwhelmed by the notifications, realizes he has gained some incredibly valuable items. Indeed, the Supreme Luxury Newbie Gift Pack. Dak. Identity. Magical Breeding House Shopkeeper. Novice Breeder. Abilities. Conqueror's Hockey LV.10. Strength LV.1. Agility LV.1. Stamina LV.1. Breeding LV.1. Pokémon. Darkrai. LV.100. Note: the level shown for Pokémon is an estimate of its strength in the current world, with the strongest historical figure of this world as the template, and not its true level in its native world. The level will vary in other worlds, and Darkrai's level is close to the strongest in this world's history. Good. Starting today, I'll become a breeder. Dak. As Dak speaks, a mysterious and eerie figure slowly rises from a shadow. Darkrai. This creature, shrouded in black, seems to wear a red scarf around its neck, with white hair and only one blue eye visible. In the Pokémon world, it's known as the Nightmare Pokémon, a dark and ghost-type legendary Pokémon. Darkrai, a Pokémon of legend, is so rare that few have seen in person. Dak closely observes Darkrai, his first partner and a significant support for a long time to come. Hello, Darkrai. My name is Dak, and from now on, we'll be partners fighting side by side. Dak extends his hand in greeting. The excitement of meeting a real Pokémon for the first time is undeniable. Who wouldn't want to take their family to live in the world of Pokémon if given the chance? Darkrai. Darkrai nods and shakes Dak's hand. Now, Darkrai is also somewhat confused, having woken up in this place unexpectedly and seemingly captured by the man before him. However, this doesn't bother him much. After thousands of years of loneliness, spending days in a daze, and nearly losing himself, becoming a trainer's partner is a novel experience. The man before him seems all right. Even their names are similar. Conqueror's Hockey LV.10. The highest level of this ability is level 10, indicating that Dak's Conqueror's Haki is at the maximum level. In the entire One Piece world, it's unknown how many possess Conqueror's Haki at this level, but certainly they can be counted on one hand. Upon acquiring this ability, Dak feels his ambitions, always present within him, but suppressed due to limited capabilities, beginning to amplify. This isn't an implanted thought. It's a subconscious desire he's always had, now growing stronger. Many ideas of what he wants to do, such as changing the world structure, start to flood his mind. Though I'd like to try releasing Conqueror's Haki, it's probably best to wait for a better opportunity. Dak decides it's best not to risk damaging anything in the shop, especially the Pokémon eggs resting quietly on the lawn. Let's take a look at these adorable babies first. Dak turns to the 10 eggs that have suddenly appeared under the tree. Oval-shaped and colorful, each with a unique pattern, reflecting a delicate luster under the warm light. They look extremely cute. Darkrai, too, looks curiously at the 10 eggs. In his long life, Darkrai has never cared for eggs or Pokémon, and the thought of frequently caring for various Pokémon eggs and infants excites and nerves him. They both approach the tree and quietly observe the eggs nestled together, their breathing becoming imperceptibly gentle. Dak carefully picks up a pink egg and cradles it in his arms. Warm, you hold it. Dak passes the pink egg to Darkrai. Darkrai, eyes widening as the egg approaches, clumsily accepts it, taking a while to calm his excited heart and trembling hands. Holding the tiny life in his hands, Darkrai feels a desire to live for the first time. He wants to protect these little ones, watch them hatch and grow. Dak, seeing Darkrai's reaction, can't help but smile. To him, Darkrai seems almost like a blank slate. Despite living for eons, Darkrai's understanding of the world is minimal because no one has ever shown or taught him these things. But that's okay. Dak plans to teach him gradually. Darkrai places the egg back and then stands quietly by, like a sentinel, simply standing, staring, guarding. Dak doesn't disturb Darkrai. Every Pokémon has its own way of doing things, and perhaps this is Darkrai's style. He opens the mission panel, now updated with new tasks. Main mission, a trainer starting point. Task, sell the first Pokémon egg. Reward, ability, potential detection, Pokémon. Daily mission 1. Clean the shop, polish the Pokémon eggs, and make the little ones comfortable. Daily mission 2. Take the Pokémon eggs out of the shop for a walk. Let them bask in the sun. Daily mission 3. Tell the Pokémon bedtime stories. Reward, slight experience increase in strength, agility, stamina. The main mission can't be rushed. As a parent to these children, Dak wants to find them partners worthy of trust and commitment. In this world, regardless of justice or evil, some people are simply not deserving of a Pokémon's favor, such as the Celestial Dragons, most members of the world government, the majority of world nobles, and the vast majority of pirates. These individuals might see Pokémon as tools for profit or achieving goals. If he can't find suitable partners, he's prepared to care for these children for life. Dak looks at the 3 daily missions, feeling pressure from the second. After all, he's unsure what lies outside the door. But this pressure is manageable. With Darkrai by his side, Dak feels confident enough to explore outside, determining a safe spot before taking the eggs for a walk and sunbathing. Darkrai, shall we take a look outside first? Dak takes a deep breath, ready to scout the area outside the door for the eggs' future outings. Darkrai nods, accompanying Dak to the door. After mentally preparing themselves, Dak opens the door. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The moment the door opened, Dak was stunned. What appeared before his eyes was a deck filled with noise and bustle, as if a grand banquet was being held. If that were all, it wouldn't be too much of a problem. But the issue was, sitting at the forefront of the deck, directly in front of Dak, was a man of terrifying stature. The man held a giant bicento and had a white mustache that curled upwards at the ends. If Dak couldn't recognize who this man was, he might as well give up on any grand ambitions he had. The strongest man in the world, captain of the Whitebeard pirates, Whitebeard, Edward Newgate. Dak was only stunned for 2.5 seconds before he started to back away, planning to retreat back into the shop. Suddenly, a pineapple-haired man appeared next to him, slinging an arm over his shoulder and moving forward a few steps, and then the door behind them naturally closed. "Say, you look somewhat unfamiliar. Are you a new crew member?" The pineapple-haired man, wearing a purple shirt and exposing his chest, seemed somewhat drunk and leaned in close to Dak, squinting at him, unable to recognize who he was. Whitebeard Pirates Ship Doctor and First Division Commander, Phoenix Marco. Starting off at hell level, huh? Are you kidding me? Just as Dak had been fired up with enthusiasm back in the shop, he felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He felt utterly disheartened. He was just an ordinary person, for goodness sake. Give him some time to develop before throwing him into this place. Dak. Darkrai hid within Dak's shadow. Feeling Dak's panic, Darkrai was ready to teach the pineapple-haired man a lesson. However, Dak quickly gestured for Darkrai to stop the attack. If they really started a fight, that would truly be a hell-level beginning. Then, the Whitebeard pirates would attack him en masse, and he didn't believe Darkrai was strong enough to fight the entire Whitebeard pirates and still protect him. The system had already given a clear explanation of Darkrai's real combat power, which was close to the strongest historical figure in this world. What if that figure was a young Whitebeard, who was known as the strongest of his time? Dak didn't know how Whitebeard's current level compared to his peak, but if a young Whitebeard was that max level template, then Darkrai wouldn't have a chance to protect him from thousands of Whitebeard's men while fighting Whitebeard. The situation was still relatively stable for now, depending on how he played it. Yes, I just boarded a few days ago. By the way, it seems like we're almost out of drinks. I'll go get some." Dak smiled and made an excuse to escape from Marco's grip, heading towards a room on the side. As long as he opened the door, he could return to the shop in an instant. Then he would be safe. Swish! With the fall of 2 rose petals, a western sword was placed in front of Dak's face, just a step away from touching the blade. Just seeing those 2 petals, Dak knew who had stopped him. Whitebeard Pirates' 5th Division Commander, Flower Sword Vista, a great swordsman. "I must find a way to get the Doordor fruit after I return." Dak's mood plummeted to rock bottom. If he could get the Doordor fruit, he would practically be invincible from then on. "I don't remember having someone like you on board, buddy. How did you get up here?" Vista, wearing a gentleman's hat and a black suit, stared at Dak warily. Sneaking onto the Moby Dick under the noses of these division commanders was no easy feat. Marco, now fully sober, placed his arm back on Dak's shoulder. His smile slightly threatening, explained. The commotion attracted everyone's attention. When Dak felt the oppressive gazes shift towards him, he knew he couldn't escape. "May I speak over there?" Dak bravely pointed to a spot not far in front of Newgate. He clearly wanted to talk to their leader. Marco let him come. Newgate heard Dak's request. He was somewhat curious about what the young, handsome man in his early 20s had to say to him. "Got it, Pops. You're lucky. You just happened to arrive on a day when we're in good spirits." Marco nodded and then led Dak in front of Newgate, standing beside him to watch Dak. Everyone cleared a path, surrounding them on both sides, treating Dak as if he were Shanks himself. Dak almost thought he was some badass capable of going toe-to-toe with Shanks. "Sorry for the intrusion." Dak bowed slightly, showing the politeness expected from the land of etiquette. He had indeed suddenly appeared at their home and disturbed their party. Apologizing was only proper. "How did you get here?" Newgate was more interested in how Dak managed to infiltrate their base under everyone's watch. Could it be some devil fruit ability? "It's a long story, but let me introduce myself first. My name is Dak, a breeder and the owner of the magical breeding house." Dak steadied his heart and calmly introduced himself. The pressure from the Whitebeard pirates was intense, but it was clear they were reasonable. Speaking nicely should keep him out of danger. "A breeder? What do you breed?" Marco asked curiously, very supportive. "Pokémon?" The word Pokémon plunged everyone into confusion. Searching their brains, they couldn't figure out what it was. "These are magical creatures, which you can also call spirits." Dak, seeing their confusion, patiently explained, "There are many types, conservatively estimated to be over 1,000, each with magical powers. You can think of them as animals that have eaten devil fruits. Dak's explanation was simple and easy to understand, especially after providing an example. Even the simplest of minds could grasp the concept. You're saying you breed these creatures? Diamond Jozu, the quiet giant standing on Newgate's other side, spoke up. Yes. Dak knew mere words wouldn't be enough to convince them, so he gestured to his side. Darkrai. Under the astonished gazes of all the Whitebeard Pirates members, Darkrai slowly rose from Dak's shadow. Hey, what's that? Coming out of the shadow, he's telling the truth. The world is truly full of wonders. I feel like I'm going to have nightmares tonight. The deck of the Moby Dick suddenly became lively. Even Newgate's eyes showed interest. Living for 63 years and traveling every corner of the sea, he had never seen such a magical creature before. And it was bred by humans, with supposedly over 1,000 varieties. Dak noticed Newgate's change in expression, felt certain he wouldn't be in trouble, and breathed a sigh of relief. Now, he could start a sales pitch, attempting to sell the first egg, but first, he had to showcase the charm of Pokémon, the style of the Whitebeard Pirates, deserving of the emotional bond with Pokémon. What abilities does it have? Vista, the 4th Division commander, seemed very interested in Darkrai, moving closer to ask. Dak liked Vista's demeanor. Because Vista had been looking at him gently from the start, Dak almost felt no pressure, as if Vista was an easygoing person. Hearing Vista's question, Dak smiled. It was as if the opportunity had presented itself at the perfect moment. Please, allow Darkrai to demonstrate. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 3, let me witness it myself. Right after Dak finished speaking, Marco transformed into a phoenix and soared into the sky, looking down at Darkrai from above. Darkrai glanced at Dak, and after receiving a nod, also took to the sky. In the realm of legendary Pokémon, there are hardly any that can't fly. Go ahead. Marco was confident, not wanting to bully the weak. In his eyes, this mysterious creature before him couldn't possibly be stronger than him, so he didn't plan to make the first move. If it could land a hit on him, then this creature would be considered formidable. Dark Void. This was the first time Dak was commanding a Pokémon in battle, and he was a bit excited. He started with one of Darkrai's signature moves. Darkrai raised its hand towards Marco. In an instant, the space around Marco twisted dramatically, and a giant black hole with a 50-meter radius spontaneously formed, swallowing Marco into it. Marco didn't have time to react, or rather, he intended to withstand Darkrai's move to test its power. But he didn't expect the move to originate not from Darkrai's raised hand, but directly in the space around him. In this world, most ability users release their moves outward from themselves, with only a very few devil fruits able to manifest effects directly from a point in space. And even those require conditions, like the room of the Nomi Darkrai's move caught everyone off guard. The 100-meter diameter giant black hole that appeared in the sky overwhelmed everyone with a sense of oppression, and Marco's disappearance left everyone dumbfounded. Gentlemen, don't worry, he's fine. He's just been put to sleep in a dark space. Dak, sweating slightly on his forehead, spoke before the Whitebeard pirates could react. He feared that once they came to their senses, he wouldn't have a chance to explain before being attacked. Hearing Dak's explanation, the members of the Whitebeard pirates turned their gaze towards him, their eyes filled with danger and suspicion. Even if Marco was taken down in an instant, they felt even more at risk. No one noticed a fat man with black hair in the crowd, his head bowed, his eyes filled with madness and disbelief. Darkrai returned to Dak's side and cleverly gestured with its hand, creating a 2-meter diameter black hole next to it, from which Marco fell out. Huff, huff. Marco was lying on the deck, sound asleep with drool leaking out. However, he was unharmed and appeared to be in good condition. Thatch rushed over to wake Marco, who woke up bewildered and confused. Idiot, you're something else, kid. Newgate glanced at Marco, shook his head in resignation, and then turned his attention to Dak and Darkrai. Breeding, is this your devil fruit ability? Izo, the 16th Division commander, who looked as beautiful as a woman, asked. No. Dak thought for a moment, and then shook his head. He had considered claiming it as such, but ultimately decided against it. After all, he would be selling Pokémon eggs and Pokémon to customers later, and they would realize that this wasn't some unique breeding ability, but the Pokémon's own limitless potential. You possess such power but choose to sell it instead of keeping it for yourself. Jozu, the giant, was surprisingly sharp. To him, the power like Darkray's could dominate the world if enough of it was available. Yet this man intended to sell it? What was his intention? Pokémon don't belong to me alone. They are born with their own will and should explore the world with their companions. I just hope they can grow up happily and lead a wonderful life. Dak understood what Jozu was implying, but dominating the world was not his intention. He wanted to complete the system's tasks, yes, but if his Pokémon were unhappy or dissatisfied after being sold, he would rather not complete the task at all. After all, there was no penalty. Many in the Whitebeard pirates were skeptical of this claim. Accustomed to the cutthroat world of the sea, they weren't easily convinced. I believe him, Newgate spoke up. In that moment, the look he gave Dak was filled with recognition. What Dak said could only be understood by someone who was also a parent like himself. He was the strongest in the world, and many outside speculated he harbored great ambitions, like becoming the Pirate King or ruling the world, among other things. But in reality, he only wished for his sons to grow up happy and safe. As the leader of the Whitebeard pirates, Newgate's word changed the crew's perspective, making them trust Dak as well. This level of leadership and influence was truly astounding. Does every Pokémon have abilities like that? Now, Marco had regained his senses and looked towards Darkrai. Darkray's move had left a significant impression on him. Suddenly falling asleep was hard to withstand, and even his observation hockey didn't catch it. No, that's a unique ability of Darkrai. Dak shook his head, openly explaining to the crowd. Darkray's Dark Void directly affects space, creating an extremely unstable void that connects to a dark space. If any of you can influence space, then that move might fail. Dak's explanation was speculative, but not without reason. If Newgate used his Gura Nomi abilities on the Dark Void, it probably wouldn't hold. Similarly, abilities like the Door Fruit or Ope Nomi could evade the Dark Void's effect. Not every Pokémon has space-affecting powers. Some are even more terrifying, capable of influencing time. Phew, that's a relief. Wait, not all of them are that strong, right? Marco just relaxed when he suddenly became alert again. No, Pokémon are very weak when they're born, almost like human babies. However, their potential is theoretically unlimited. With proper care and training, they could become very strong. Dak didn't overpromise, but also didn't undersell the potential. It's not only the near-divine or divine beast that can reach Darkray's level. Even Pokémon like Beedrill and Eradicate could become devastatingly powerful with the right training. Gururara, interesting. Newgate was now very interested in the Pokémon Dak mentioned, wanting to witness each type for himself. Oh, then, would you like to visit my shop and pick a Pokémon egg? Dak's eyes sparkled, seeing a chance for the Whitebeard pirates to become his first customers. All members of the Whitebeard pirates looked to their captain for the decision. Of course, but before that, Newgate nodded, stood up, and approached Dak. Would you like to be my son? End of Chapter 4. Chapter 4. Dak was stunned. He hadn't expected Newgate to suddenly pop such a question. Moreover, for him, standing at 1.8 meters tall, Newgate's 6.6 meter stature was oppressively overwhelming, casting a shadow over him as if eclipsing the sun. Sorry, while I don't mind being friends, joining a pirate crew wouldn't be conducive to running my shop. Dak shook his head, expressing his most genuine thoughts. Gurura, I knew it. You're an extraordinary fellow. Newgate laughed, not minding Dak's refusal. He had seen it coming. Dak was destined for great things, whether through the power he wielded or the subtle air of authority he maintained even in the presence of the entire Whitebeard crew. He wasn't wrong in his judgment. Then, please follow me. I'll take you to my shop. Treating a customer like royalty, Dak became the ultimate salesman, very polite. Tell Marco the location, and he'll adjust the course. Newgate hadn't quite caught on and called Marco over. Huh? Sorry, I didn't explain properly. The magical breeding house is located in the void, and while there are pathways to the shop from anywhere in this world, it doesn't actually exist within this world. So, it can't be reached by sailing. Dax scratched his head, succinctly elevating the prestige of his shop in just a few words. Having already shocked the Whitebeard pirates, he might as well add a bit more flair. He wasn't trying to show off or play coy. He was simply stating the truth. Hey, are you serious? If it weren't for the power you just showed, I'd have thought you were crazy and kicked you into the sea. Marco looked at Dak, not seeming to joke around, and was somewhat shocked. His worldview was beginning to crumble. Really, Newgate, however, remained calm, having already seen Darkrai demonstrate its spatial power. Even though what Dak was saying now seemed even more unbelievable, it wasn't too hard to digest after the warm-up. That is, before hearing the next part of Dak's explanation. In truth, there are endless worlds within the universe, which I refer to as the myriad realms. Your world is but one among them, and the magical breeding house exists in the spatial cracks between these myriad realms. Did Dak lie? No. Everything he said was true, merely using the art of language to further elevate the prestige of the magical breeding house. After he finished speaking, the entire Moby Dick fell silent. The sea was calm, and the surroundings fell into a deathly hush. Do you realize the gravity of what you're saying? Newgate was the first to speak up, staring at Dak with wide eyes. Dak's words were shattering his worldview. He couldn't believe what Dak was saying. I know it's hard for you to accept. Come with me. Dak shook his head, understanding Newgate's perspective. When he first crossed over and received the system, he felt the same way. It's one thing to face the brutal reality of crossing over. It's another to believe in such concepts before experiencing them. Dak walked towards a certain door, with Newgate following behind. As soon as Newgate moved, the entire crew of the Whitebeard pirates followed suit. Wait. The magical breeding house has just opened, and the shop is quite small. It can't accommodate so many people at once. Dak quickly turned to stop them. How could a space of just 100 square meters fit so many people? Hey, you just made it sound so impressive. I didn't say anything wrong, though. Dak shrugged somewhat innocently. The magical breeding house was indeed just starting out, but it was bound to become impressive in the future. Marco, Sachi, you two come with me. The rest stay on the Moby Dick. Yes, Pops. Newgate swiftly selected who would accompany him. Marco was a given, and Sachi was chosen for his keen interest in Pokémon, which caught Newgate's eye. Dak nodded and then led the three forward. Newgate's exaggerated footsteps echoed behind Dak, a reminder of the exaggerated physiques prevalent in this world. Hey, Dak, don't trick us. Sachi, quite familiar by now, sidled up to Dak. Right, if you're lying, just join us and be Pop's son, ha. Marco's wariness had dissipated. He could tell Dak bore no malice. I won't trick you. Dak, now in full view, led everyone to a large door and began to push. It wouldn't budge. This is the captain's quarters. Marco stepped forward and opened the door, revealing the Moby Dick's captain's quarters. Now everyone started to view Dak with skepticism. After all, Dak seemed too weak to even open a door. No, it's not that you can't push the door, but that it has to be me who opens it to reach the destination. Dak shook his head to clarify, then pondered his next move. He couldn't just hand out magical tokens willy-nilly. Then we'll just press your hand and push together. Sachi bounced over. All right, let's try. Dak agreed, placing his hand on the door. Sachi then pressed his hand over Dak's and pushed, creating a somewhat awkward scene. But that wasn't important, because the door opened, and what lay beyond wasn't the familiar captain's quarters, but another room. Nanny, it's actually real. Where is that? There's grass and a lake, and I see a tree. Look, aren't those colorful eggs under the tree? Those must be the Pokémon eggs he mentioned. The scene became quite lively. Members of the Whitebeard pirates couldn't help but crowd around, craning their necks to peek into the space beyond the door. Since the door was large, many could see into the interior. This made Dak realize he might need to hang a curtain in front of the door in the future for some privacy. Let's go. Dak, reassured by the sight of his shop, knew he was safe once inside. Darkrai, eager as ever, flew into the shop first, checking on the eggs under the tree. Then Dak stepped inside. Marco and Satchi followed without hesitation. "Wait, Pops. Don't come in. Don't enter." Just as Marco and Satchi had set foot inside, they immediately stretched out their hands to stop Newgate from entering. "What's wrong?" Newgate frowned, looking at Dak, not sensing any trickery from him. "Our strength, it's suppressed. Right. I feel incredibly weak upon entering here. Probably couldn't even beat a goose in the kitchen." End of Chapter 5. Chapter 5. Marco and Satchi looked serious, as they could clearly sense their own condition. Marco raised his hand to use his fruit powers, only managing to produce a spark. "Oh." Newgate wasn't in a rush to pull Marco and Satchi back since Dak had no intention of harming them. He didn't sense any malice from Dak. This is one of the rules of the magical breeding house, designed to prevent unruly customers from harming the Pokémon inside the shop. So, the strength of anyone entering the shop will be suppressed. If you're worried, it's okay to stay outside. Dak turned and smiled at Newgate, who was still outside the door. Now, Dak wasn't panicked at all. Attacks from outside couldn't penetrate into the breeding house, and even if he couldn't handle them, Darkrai was there. Dak didn't overestimate his ability to defeat Marco and Satchi, even if their powers were suppressed to his level. Their combat experience and skills were not something he could match. Conqueror's Haki wasn't something to be used lightly. "I see." Newgate nodded, agreeing with Dak's explanation, tossed his Bicento onto the deck behind him, and walked into the shop with confidence. The moment he stepped onto the grass, Newgate too felt significantly weaker. He probably hadn't been this weak since he was born. Dak, unaware he had been silently criticized, went under the tree to check on the eggs with Darkrai. They were just as they had been before he left. He didn't know how long it would take for them to hatch, but he suspected it wouldn't be a short period. Dak turned to see the three men behind him, who were examining the shop's environment and layout. "Let's close the door first. It's too noisy outside and might disturb the babies." Dak gestured to Newgate and pointed at the eggs under the tree. Newgate looked at the eggs and then closed the door, instantly quieting the shop. My God, he was telling the truth. Is there really another world? "Pops, I want to see it." Marco and Satchi looked as curious and bewildered as when they first set out to see with Newgate. Newgate didn't respond. That wasn't something they were meant to know about. Even Roger was unaware of such things. Without Dak's revelation, they likely wouldn't have believed in the existence of other worlds. "Can we visit these other worlds?" Satchi asked Dak curiously, with Marco and Newgate also looking on. "I'm not sure if I can let you visit other worlds. Maybe, maybe not. But you will definitely come into contact with people from other worlds through the magical breeding house." Given the system's interdimensional level, it was inevitable that people from other worlds would visit the magical breeding house eventually. When people from different worlds are in the magical breeding house at the same time, they'll come into contact with each other. "Interesting," Marco grinned, intrigued by the idea of meeting people from other worlds. "It's too early to talk about that. Right now, the magical breeding house is only open to your world. Linking to another world won't happen for at least a year or two." "All right." Marco and Satchi's excitement cooled, and their attention shifted to the eggs. Eggs that could hatch into mysterious creatures. The prospect of unboxing these creatures thrilled them. "Marco, Satchi, pretend you don't know about this when we get back." Newgate spoke up, anticipating the chaos that would ensue among his crew if they learned of these revelations. Such worldview-shattering information wasn't suitable for widespread dissemination. If these events weren't happening for a year or two, there was no need to discuss them yet, granting him a couple of years of peace. Marco and Satchi, both sensible, understood Newgate's intentions. "You said you're selling these eggs? The Whitebeard pirates will buy them all." Newgate looked at the eggs and then addressed Dak. "You can only buy one for now." Dak immediately shook his head in refusal without hesitation. He didn't doubt the treatment Pokémon would receive among the Whitebeard pirates, one of the few groups he trusted to care for Pokémon. They would undoubtedly become great companions for the Pokémon. However, the Whitebeard pirates had no prior experience in breeding Pokémon and knew nothing about it, unlike Dak, who at least had a book to learn from. Pokemon and humans have entirely different habits. Moreover, each Pokemon species has specific lifestyle habits. Just that knowledge alone is vast. Giving the Whitebeard pirates 10 Pokemon eggs all at once was too much. Even if they could treat each egg equally and attentively, the care needed before and after the Pokemon hatch is not something they could provide. If every egg belonged to a different species, it would throw the Whitebeard pirates into chaos. Thus, he was only willing to sell them one egg, allowing them to focus their care on this little one. Only after he was convinced the Whitebeard pirates could properly care for the Pokemon would he consider selling them more eggs. Dak candidly shared these thoughts with the three men before him. After hearing Dak's explanation, they understood why he was only willing to sell one egg. They realized Dak was different from profit-driven merchants. He genuinely cared about the happiness of his Pokemon's future lives. All right, then just one. Newgate nodded, not pressing further. Ultimately, he respected Dak's philosophy. Just like he wouldn't want to marry off all his daughters at once without knowing if they could be happy, he understood Dak's concern. But which one should we choose? Marco was now in a dilemma, suffering from choice paralysis. Damn, can't tell anything useful from the outside. Sachi also became frustrated, scrutinizing the 10 eggs without discerning any clues. Please don't rush. You're not choosing a pet, but a future companion and family member. Take your time, even if it takes longer. I'm not in a hurry. Dak tried to calm them, feeling nervous himself during his first sale of a Pokemon egg. Family, huh? Newgate squatted down to examine the tiny eggs. To him, the eggs were incredibly small, and the world's strongest man found himself in a rare moment of indecision, more challenging than attacking Marine headquarters. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Dak watched Newgate with a sudden burst of imagination, picturing him on a battle stage shouting to an opposing trainer, "Let's show them our bond." Dak couldn't help but laugh, despite trying hard to cover his mouth. Huh? What are you laughing at, boss? Marco, who was in the midst of his dilemma, turned to look at Dak. By now, Dak's words had been validated, and his status had subtly risen in their eyes. Marco and Sachi no longer felt it appropriate to casually use Dak's name, despite Dak's indifference to formalities. Nothing much, just in time. You pick, and I have some things I'd like to share with you. Dak first shook his head, then his expression turned serious. Now, on his own turf, he spoke with confidence, and there were things he felt he had to address. Go ahead. Marco, noting Dak's serious tone, raised an eyebrow. Pokemon are fascinating creatures. The amount of affection you give them is returned in kind. They have their own will and thoughts, not mere wild instincts, but a level of consciousness comparable to humans. When they're born, they're like a blank slate, and you are the brush that colors their lives. If they don't grow into what you expect, there's no doubt it's because you, as their trainer, have failed. Dak's words captured the full attention of Newgate and his crew. His blunt delivery, devoid of any sugarcoating, was something few would dare to express directly to these three. Most people would tremble just standing in front of them. Dak didn't sense any negativity from their gaze. They were simply listening intently to what he had to say. These children are handed over from me. I must choose suitable partners for them. I don't care what they become in the future, whether they're heroes in the spotlight or notorious villains, as long as it's their choice. As long as they're not bullied and live happily, I won't interfere in their growth. Dak primarily addressed Newgate with these words. He believed that as the father of many children, Newgate would understand his feelings. But if they're bullied and come crying back to me, no matter who it is, I'll settle the matter thoroughly. The magical breeding house will always back these children. Dak spoke naturally, without premeditation. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to say this now, but he was genuinely concerned about the little ones being bullied in the future. He positioned himself as their maternal home. From now on, whoever came to take a Pokemon from the shop, he would repeat these words. Darkrai nodded in agreement from the side. Though it had only a brief acquaintance with the unborn little ones, it wouldn't hesitate to teach a lesson to anyone who bullied the Pokemon. All right, Newgate gestured for Marco and Sachi, who were about to make promises, to stop and simply nodded in acknowledgement. He knew that promises and assurances meant little at this time. Time would tell if the Whitebeard pirates were qualified partners. Then, I entrust them to you. Dak bowed to Newgate and sighed in relief inside. Edward Newgate. He trusted this man. It remained to be seen which lucky child would be chosen by him. Pops, how about this one? After a long deliberation, Satchi pointed to a tenderly pink egg. I find this one the most pleasing to the eye, as if this child is destined to be part of our family. Marco nodded in agreement. He felt a comfortable energy emanating from the pink egg, unrelated to observation hockey, more like a resonance with his own fruit powers. All right, let's choose her. She looks like a girl. Newgate glanced at the egg and smiled warmly, the tiny pink sphere smaller than his fingernail. Haha, Pops wants a daughter now, huh? Satchi couldn't help but laugh, patting Newgate's knee. Marco, his eyes shining, picked up the egg from the ground, cradling the warm egg in both hands, appearing lost in thought. Although it was still just an egg, Marco could feel the tender and vigorous life within. This was their unborn family member. Darkrai watched as Marco took away the egg it had just held, feeling suddenly forlorn and retreating into Dak's shadow. What do you need in exchange? Newgate looked at Dak. Such a potentially powerful magical creature surely couldn't be bought with ordinary means, right? Even if it cost 1 billion berries, they wouldn't mind. This was a consensus among Newgate and his crew, but they all had the intuition that Dak wouldn't overcharge them. 1 million berries. Dak glanced at the egg and spoke quietly. The system hadn't set a maximum price for Pokemon eggs, only a minimum of 100,000 berries. This was the first Pokemon egg he was selling of significant meaning, and though he hadn't had a chance to care for the child before selling it, at least the Whitebeard pirates were trustworthy customers. Various emotions tangled in his heart, becoming complex, but Dak eventually stated a relatively low price. The price was less than 1/100th of a devil fruits. Okay, Newgate nodded, not saying more, and led the children back towards the shop's exit. They all knew whether the price was high or low. Dak's setting of the price wasn't a surprise because they sensed that Dak wasn't a purely profit-driven merchant. They needed to go back for the money. Berries weren't something they usually carried, especially since their clothes often got torn in fights. Hey, by the way, boss, it's Pop's birthday today. Come join the party on the Moby Dick. Satchi turned back to Dak before leaving. A birthday? All right, you go ahead. I'll come over in a bit. Dak stepped forward, thinking of the deck on the Moby Dick as he placed his hand on the door, which then expanded to allow Newgate to pass through. Outside was the very place they had entered from. See you. Newgate left a message and was the first to exit, returning to the Moby Dick. Marco and Satchi followed him out. Dak, left in the shop, opened the mission panel. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 7. Main Quest. A Trainer's Beginning, completed. Reward. Ability, Talent Detection, Pokemon. Upon completing the main quest, a new ability titled Talent Detection was added to Dak's personal panel. This ability didn't display any level, presumably indicating it didn't have tiers or advanced levels. Main quest updated. Main quest. The first lesson in breeding, crystal making. Objective: prepare materials and follow the guide in breeder. From rookie to master, to successfully handcraft a quality Pokemon crystal. Reward: shop expansion, crafting area and living quarters. Expansion is possible after all. I must complete this task as soon as possible, ideally within the next few days, or I'll have nowhere to sleep. Dak noted, not particularly surprised. The inclusion of living quarters was critically necessary, as the shop currently lacked even the basic amenities like a bathroom or a place to sleep. His daily tasks remained unchanged. Simple tasks ideally completed before heading to the Moby Dick, hoping to enlist some assistance from the Whitebeard pirates. Open the magical shop. With a silent command, a panel materialized before Dak. Balance: 0 magical coins. Magical coins serve as the currency for transactions in the magical shop and to operate the magical roulette, with an exchange rate of 10,000 berries for 1 magical coin. The shop displayed an overwhelming array of items, from specific Pokemon eggs to related gear, including rare items like plates, orbs, and specific Mega Evolution Stones. However, some items appear to have been modified. For instance, the Revival Herb, typically effective only on Pokémon, could now be used on humans, omitting the side effect of decreased affection. Revival Herb, capable of restoring health fully as long as there's a breath left. Other items, if released, would surely cause a frenzy across the seas, such as Phoenix's Tear, capable of resurrecting the dead. Close. Dak wasn't overwhelmed with excitement, as these items were beyond his current purchasing power. However, the potential they represented seeded numerous ideas about altering the current world situation in his mind. Let's test the new ability, Dak decided, shaking off the multitude of thoughts and focusing on the eggs below the tree. Talent detection, green, blue, purple, green, white, purple, blue, green, blue with 1 white, 3 green, 3 blue, and 2 purple readings. Green and blue represented the most common talents among the Pokemon eggs. Dak, observing the colors emanating around the eggs, frowned slightly. This ability was somewhat lackluster compared to his expectations. He had hoped it would reveal more about the unborn Pokemon rather than merely their talent levels, which were indicated only by colors. It seems this ability is merely for setting prices for the different Pokemon eggs more effectively. Approaching the eggs, Dak picked up the one showing a white aura, indicative of the lowest talent level, and felt slightly annoyed. In his view, Pokemon's futures were limitless, and their talent shouldn't constrain them. System, does talent indicate the limit of a Pokemon's potential? Holding the green egg gently, Dak asked somewhat unwillingly. Talent does not indicate a Pokemon's limit. Pokemon's limits are infinite. Talent only signifies the degree of returns from their efforts, essentially their progress rate. Hearing this explanation, Dak immediately smiled in relief. This aligned more closely with his understanding of Pokemon. Returning the egg to its place, Dak felt somewhat reassured. What exactly do the talent levels are? White, green, blue, purple, orange, gold, red. Pokemon's talent can be improved by purchasing items from the magical shop. Dak, considering the array of eggs, pondered over the pricing structure. White at 100,000, green at 1 million, blue at 10 million, purple at 100 million, orange at 1 billion, gold at 10 billion, red, we'll see when we get there. He nodded to himself, feeling the pricing was reasonable. Lower tiers were aimed at common folk who sought Pokemon companions out of loneliness or for practical assistance, not ambition. Such Pokemon wouldn't need to feel pressured to surpass their natural talents. Pricing strategies before and after Pokemon hatch must differ. After birth, a Pokemon's personality, attributes, and traits become clear, so each Pokemon will have a distinct price. Most importantly, the Pokemon's own wishes are crucial. After hatching, Pokemon gradually develop their own wills. Some may wish to leave the breeding house, while others might prefer to stay with Dak. Hence, the choice would not solely be the customer's, but a mutual selection. Only when both the Pokemon and the customer find agreement would Dak consider the sale price, adjusting it based on the customer's financial situation. If someone was genuinely impoverished, but the Pokemon wished to accompany them, Dak would set the price at the minimum of 100,000 berries. Dak silently established this set of rules in his mind. Darkrai. Dark. Emerging from Dak's shadow, Darkrai appeared, still not entirely cheerful. Using talent detection on Darkrai revealed a gold aura, nearly blinding Dak. Yet, when Dak checked the panel, Darkrai's level was at 100. System, can Darkrai's level no longer increase? Darkrai has reached the power limit of the One Piece world. Due to the unique nature of its Dark Void ability, further growth could disrupt the spatial order of this world. Thus, it is world-limited. Returning to its original world would allow its level to continue increasing. Currently, Darkrai is equivalent to level 85 in its original world. Even if it cannot level up, Darkrai can still enhance its combat power by learning or mastering powers from this world. Original world means Pokemon world, right? But level 85. Dak was surprised. He had thought Darkrai would be at the top in the Pokemon world, but it seemed there was still a gap. However, He believed the system would help Darkrai reach that level, and with Darkray's talent, it shouldn't be too difficult. Darkrai, let's bathe the eggs. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 8, Daily Task 1. Clean the shop front, wipe the Pokemon eggs. This was essentially giving the eggs a bath. Oops, our shop doesn't have any daily necessities. Forget brooms or mops for cleaning the shop. There weren't even towels for wiping the eggs. Moreover, if he couldn't complete the main quest today, he might have to sleep on the lawn tonight. Dak rubbed his head in slight frustration, having forgotten these essentials amidst the day's events. I need to attend Newgate's birthday party and exchange some essentials with the Whitebeard pirates. Daily Task 2. Take the Pokemon egg for a walk outside the shop. Dak nodded, then called Darkrai to help carry the eggs outside. With Pokemon's help, this task was much easier. Dak didn't need to carry them out one by one. Darkrai waved his hand, and the remaining 9 eggs were transported into a dark space, akin to a storage space that could hold living things. The shop door opened. Dak thought he would be greeted by a crowd, but instead he found the entire Whitebeard Pirates crew densely surrounding Marco, all fixated on the pink egg he held. Dak shook his head with a smile, pleased by the scene. Presumably, that little one would receive a lot of love once born. At that moment, Dak remembered he hadn't detected the talent of that pink egg yet. Although it didn't seem important now, he couldn't help but take a glance. Purple. A egg worth 100 million berries, sold by him for just $1 million. Dak sighed, but the smile on his face didn't fade. Even though he lost a lot of money, he didn't regret it. With a breeding house in his possession, he wasn't worried about making money in the future. Hey, the shopkeeper is here, guys. This is our in-law. Call him out. Sachi noticed Dak and Darkrai, raising his hand in a grand gesture. Shopkeeper, being called by thousands of people made Dak a bit embarrassed. He rubbed his hair, feigning distress. Ha ha ha, don't be shy, Dak. We'll be seeing a lot more of each other in the future. Newgate laughed upon seeing this scene. Given Dak's demonstrated magical capabilities, the Whitebeard pirates were bound to interact with him again. Especially now that they had an unborn baby on board, they would need to consult Dak frequently once the child was born, making frequent visits inevitable. Sure, Dak nodded, then pulled out a sky blue jade token from his pocket. Newgate, this is your birthday gift, a pocket token. With this, you can open any door and directly access the magical breeding house. Happy birthday. Huh, this is a great gift. Thanks, Dak. Don't be reserved today. Do whatever you want here. Though it's a birthday party, it actually starts in the evening. Newgate was momentarily taken aback by Dak's voice, then accepted the small jade token. Its value was self-evident. Others needed luck to reach the magical breeding house, but they could now quickly get there with this token. He was surprised because Dak had directly used his name, a name that felt ancient to him, having forgotten the last time someone addressed him by his name directly. Nowadays, everyone just calls him Whitebeard. When Newgate took the token, it magically enlarged to fit his hand perfectly before stopping. Wow, amazing! It enlarged by itself. But for the magical breeding house, this probably isn't much, right? I still can't accept what I heard just now. This unusual sight reignited discussions among the Moby Dick's crew. Teach, hiding in the crowd, kept his gaze on Darkrai, filled with interest and desire. Although Darkrai could sense someone watching him, there were too many eyes on him to pay special attention to just one. Sachi. Dak didn't care about the crowd's discussions and approached Sachi, who seemed more approachable. What's up? I'd like to borrow your kitchen and ingredients. Dak decided to attempt the main quest first. Other matters could wait. It was still early, and he could return in the evening. You going to cook? Sachi paused, curiously tilting his head at Dak. As the Whitebeard pirate's chef, Sachi was responsible for everyone's meals, boasting top-tier culinary skills in this sea. No, I plan to try making some snacks. I'm quite interested in cooking. Oh, I see. I'll take you there, and you can use anything in the kitchen. Hearing Dak's plan, Sachi seemed less enthusiastic, having hoped Dak would do something interesting. After leading Dak to the kitchen, Sachi left to prepare for the evening's birthday party. Nobody's here, perfect. Dak looked around the empty kitchen and stretched. Poke blocks would eventually become one of the exclusive products of the magical breeding house, so it was best to avoid being copied. With no one watching, Dak could freely attempt to make poke blocks. He took out the book Breeder, from novice to master, given by the system, and flipped to the section on block making. The simplest block was black, without even a unique name, serving as an entry-level test for novice breeders and Dak's target. These black blocks were low in nutrition and almost tasteless, serving mainly to satiate hunger with low cost and simplicity. In the Pokemon world, even the poorest trainers wouldn't buy these blocks, as it would be better for Pokemon to eat berries directly from forests for their rich flavor and some nutrition. Ingredients. Dak glanced at the required ingredients, which were berries found only in the Pokemon world. These could be bought in bulk from the magical shop at a low price, but Dak didn't intend to purchase those now. He wanted to try using fruits from the pirate world to see what kind of poke blocks they would produce, given that some fruits here resembled those in the ingredients list with many similar properties. Maybe these materials could also be used to make poke blocks. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 9, if only we had a berry blender. Dak awkwardly chopped various oddly shaped fruits in the kitchen. With a berry blender, it would be easy to make a small amount of poke blocks, and with a poke block machine, it would be possible to produce them in large quantities. Such a machine would be indispensable once there were more customers coming to buy poke blocks. Darkrai curiously circled around Dak, watching his actions with some confusion. I'm trying to make food. Why get better at this? You'll be in for a treat. Dak couldn't help but grin. If a single poke block could make a Pokemon show a happy smile, he would feel a great sense of accomplishment. Darkrai nodded, patiently waiting by the side. The eggs were still in his dark space. Machines can easily produce a large quantity of poke blocks, but the highest quality poke blocks are always handmade. This was a line from a breeding book, something Dak at his current level of breeding couldn't understand. Could human hands really be more precise than machines? That seemed unlikely. Success, and it was pretty easy. On his first attempt, Dak successfully made 3 small black poke blocks. Main quest, Breeding Lesson 1, Crystal Making, completed. Reward, Shop Expansion, Production, and Living Areas. The quest was easily completed. Though Dak was eager to see how his shop had changed, he still had much to do. It's always busy when you first open a shop. It'll get easier after a while. Dak comforted himself. Darkrai approached and poked the poke blocks Dak had made. The black poke blocks, about the size of a candy and lacking any luster or elasticity, crumbled easily under Darkrai's gentle touch. Darkrai looked panicked, then lowered his head. Although Dak couldn't yet understand Darkrai's emotions, he guessed Darkrai was feeling guilty. It's okay, these aren't precious or took much effort. Want to try some? Dak nonchalantly rubbed Darkrai's head. Darkrai's white, flame-like hair felt strange to touch, akin to touching water, somewhat cool. Darkrai looked up at Dak, then nodded. He picked up a poke block and placed it into his red scarf, then began to chew. He couldn't help but sneak a peek at Dak after a few chews. Despite Darkrai's cautious gaze, Dak noticed. Ha ha ha. Doesn't taste very good, does it? Dak realized what Darkrai meant and smiled awkwardly. He was prepared for this. A mix of avocado, banana, and kiwi was unlikely to taste good. Though the poke blocks weren't great, Dak's experiment was confirmed. Even fruits from the pirate world could be used to make poke blocks, possibly leading to new varieties in the future. Darkrai shook his head, then swallowed the remaining poke blocks. He didn't need to eat, but nightmares of living beings were delicious to him. Darkrai, let's take the eggs out for a walk and some sunlight. Dak brought over a small cart, seemingly used by the Whitebeard pirates for grocery shopping and transporting food. Darkrai nodded, and with a wave of his hand, the eggs gently landed on the cart, all 9 intact. Ensuring the eggs were unharmed, Dak nodded and began to push the cart outside. Upon reaching the deck, the eggs received a lot of attention. Many overly friendly people crowded around, asking various questions about the eggs, clearly curious. Dak explained what he knew while walking the eggs around. About 15 minutes later, Daily Task 2, take Pokemon eggs out of the shop for a walk, completed. Reward, a slight increase in agility experience. The daily task was completed. I can feel it. Dak looked down at his body, which showed no outward change, but he could clearly sense his physical condition improving especially his speed and reflexes, which was notably evident. Though it was a slight amount of experience, for someone as ordinary as Dak, this was a significant improvement. Continuing like this, he could eventually achieve physical enlightenment. Dak nodded, already dreaming of a bright future. "Hey, Dak, when will these little ones hatch?" Marco held the pink egg, appearing indifferent, but he turned away from anyone else who wanted to hold it. Pokemon usually hatch within a month. If it suddenly starts shining one day, it means it will hatch within that day. Dak wasn't sure when the eggs would hatch, as this was his first experience. He didn't even know the eggs' ages. They could all hatch by tomorrow. He answered Marco based on what he had read in the breeding book. "Bring these little ones over when they're born. We really want to see them." Sachi pointed at the colorful eggs in the cart, showing genuine interest. He was extremely curious about these magical little beings. "Sure, I'll bring them over to see the world when the time comes." Dak smiled and nodded, not refusing. The little ones couldn't always stay in the tiny space of the shop. They needed to go out and play. Time flew, and fearing the new world's evening breeze might chill the eggs, Dak returned them to the shop first, placed them under the tree, then hurried back. As the sun fully set, Newgate's birthday party began. The Moby Dick came alive with celebration, with the Whitebeard pirates engaging in traditional activities like singing, dancing, arm wrestling, and drinking games, far more personal and lively than going to karaoke or eating out in Dak's previous world. Attending a pirate party for the first time was a unique experience for Dak. However, amidst the lively Whitebeard pirates, Dak felt lonely and isolated, drinking in a corner. Although he was accustomed to solitude in his previous world, witnessing the camaraderie among the crew members magnified his sense of loneliness, making him realize his own isolation. Dak, Darkrai, puzzled, wondered why Dak wasn't joining the fun. "Right, I have you." Seeing Darkrai suddenly appear, Dak was momentarily stunned, then smiled warmly, draping his arm around Darkrai and pulling him close, leaving Darkrai utterly confused. He was no longer the same as before. He would have many family members in the future. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 10. When Dak woke up the next day, it was on the shop's lawn where he found himself, clueless about how he got back inside the previous night, perhaps having drunk too much. However, he felt an odd sensation as if he had grown stronger. "Darkrai, what did I do after returning last night?" Dak couldn't understand Darkrai's language, but thanks to Darkrai's gestures, Dak roughly figured out that he had managed to complete the 2 daily tasks despite being tipsy. The daily tasks haven't changed. Are today's tasks the same? Rubbing his head and heading to the lakeside to rinse his mouth, Dak then checked the task panel. "Right, Darkrai. Let's tidy up a bit." Dak noticed a pile of daily necessities and furniture accumulated in the corner of the shop, remembered from the previous day's acquisitions from the Whitebeard pirates, who hadn't asked for payment. Moreover, he discovered 2 new doors on the wall directly opposite the shop's entrance, spaced about 5 meters apart. New rooms. Eagerly, Dak approached the left room first. Opening the door revealed a space measuring 5x 4.5x 10 MDS. Slightly larger than a typical student dormitory, completely empty except for a light on the ceiling that could switch between white and orange-yellow colors. At the far end, there was a small bathroom equipped with a shower and bathtub. The walls, floor, and ceiling had a wood-like texture, emitting a crisp sound when stepped on, yet feeling warm and solid to the touch. This area, like the rest of the shop, seemed to maintain a constant comfortable temperature and humidity. Once furnished, it promised to become a cozy living space. Exiting the living space, Dak enlisted Darkrai's help to move the furniture inside, then entered the other room. It was the same size but had pure white walls and was equally empty except for a light on the ceiling. Dak had an idea of what to add here. Perhaps in the future, it would serve as a workshop or lab for studying various Pokemon-related devices seen in the magical shop, like the Poke Block making kit, fossil resurrection machine, Pokeball crafting machine, and teleportation device. These would be essential for future ambitions, though they seemed a bit distant for now. The 2 rooms were separated by a 1-meter thick wall, ensuring soundproofing. After leaving the rooms, Dak helped Darkrai to organize the bedroom, their future sleeping area, with furniture and essentials provided by the Whitebeard pirates, which included all necessary items for basic living, even appliances like water heaters and refrigerators. These appliances were moved to the adjacent manufacturing room, where electrical outlets appeared magically as they were set down. Among the provided items, some seemed frivolously included by the Whitebeard crew, such as dumbbells and selfie sticks, which Dak and Darkrai stored away, planning to return them on their next visit to the Whitebeard pirates. Well, it's already afternoon. After organizing the house and looking at the clock, Dak realized it was already 2 in the afternoon. They hadn't even had lunch yet. Darkrai, let's take the eggs out for a meal, a walk, and some sunshine. We also need to buy some pots, spices, ingredients, and other things. Dak planned to first transform the manufacturing room into a kitchen, hence the need for shopping. The 1,000,000 berries he had were meant for today's gathering of items. Otherwise, he would have converted them into 100 magical coins already. They couldn't always go out for food, especially if they ended up in dangerous places. Better to stay in as much as possible. Another unsaid reason was Dak needed to buy hats, necklaces, clothes, and even makeup for the mainline task, Pokémon grooming course. Thinking of this, Dak sneakily glanced at Darkrai, quickly averting his gaze when noticed, feeling somewhat guilty. There was no choice. Darkrai was the only Pokémon he had. Darkrai. Acknowledging Dak's call, Darkrai nodded, storing the eggs in its dark space, unaware of the upcoming grooming task. At this moment, Dak couldn't help but feel relieved that his first Pokémon was a calm and obedient Darkrai. If it were Snorlax or Slaking, known for their laziness, they might just lie down and refuse to move. Wait, as Dak, followed by Darkrai, approached the shop's entrance and opened the door, he hesitated before stepping out, turning to the system to ask, "What happens if a customer comes in while I'm out?" The shop automatically closes when unattended. Good. Reassured, Dak stepped out, and in the next moment, he and Darkrai found themselves in a bustling city, clearly not an unknown small place. The city was lively, full of people, and seemed harmonious without pirate disruptions, suggesting good public security. Looking back, Dak realized he had exited from a clothing store. From an outsider's perspective, it appeared he had just walked out of there. Darkrai's presence caused quite a stir, with screams from women and children seemingly frightened by its appearance. This dramatic reaction led Dak to speculate they were not in the Grand Line, but perhaps somewhere in the Four Seas, where people might not be as accustomed to unusual sights as those living in the Grand Line. Feeling dejected by the reaction, Darkrai floated towards Dak's shadow to hide. But Dak pulled it back, comforting it with reassurance and the promise of future acceptance. Darkrai. After a moment's hesitation, Darkrai nodded and stayed by Dak's side, facing the new world together. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 11, it's actually Lobetown. Dak had thought he had arrived in some unfamiliar place, but to his surprise, this place was not so unknown. After all, Lobetown also has its own story in the original work. Although the Lobetown now has quite a difference from Lobetown 9 years later. Dak walked ahead, pushing a large baby carriage in front of him. The carriage contained 9 eggs, attracting the attention of passers-by. This would become the exclusive vehicle for walking the eggs. And Darkrai simply floated next to the baby carriage, guarding the eggs, ignoring the gazes focused on him. As for the items purchased along the way, they were all stored in the dark space. Darkrai, wait for me, okay? I'll go inside and take a look. Suddenly, Dak, who was walking ahead, stopped and headed towards a clothing store next to him. Darkrai looked, but had no reaction, obediently standing at the door guarding the baby carriage. Previously, Dak had already bought several sets of clothes for himself, so Darkrai subconsciously thought Dak was going to buy some more. Little did he know, this time Dak's target was Darkrai. Thud! Dak, while walking, didn't notice and bumped into a lady, accidentally knocking her to the ground. Sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going, my apologies. Dak hurriedly bent down to help her up. The lady, who had fallen, raised her hand as if to grasp Dak's hand but accidentally stretched too far, touching Dak's face, but quickly retracted and took Dak's hand to stand up. It's okay. The lady left after dropping a casual remark and then walked away. Dak watched her leave with an apologetic look, entering the store after ensuring she didn't intend to pursue the matter. About 10 minutes later, Darkrai suddenly felt someone poking his shoulder. Turning around to see, Dak had returned. Dak! Darkrai looked down and noticed Dak wasn't holding anything in his hands, seeming like he didn't buy any clothes. I left something inside. Can you get it for me? I'll wait here for you. Dak gestured with his hand, pointing towards the clothing store he had just entered. Darkrai nodded and floated towards the clothing store. However, just as he floated a few meters away, a dark hole appeared behind him, swallowing the Dak that had just been there. Then, Darkrai turned around, his icy blue pupils flashing. Now looking back at the dark hole, he saw that Dak had changed into another appearance. That is to say, the Dak just now was impersonated by someone else. Initially, Darkrai didn't notice anything odd about this Dak, at least not in appearance. His behavior didn't seem off. After all, he only said one sentence and made a small gesture. Given the current level of understanding and connection between Darkrai and Dak, it wasn't possible to detect the differences between them with such a minor interaction. However, passing by that person, Darkrai could sense malice emanating from him. As a hallmark among Dark-type Pokémon, Darkrai is arguably the most sensitive to Dark-type energy, which is essentially a combination of natural energy and negative emotions. This is also why the Nightmare Pokémon enjoys causing nightmares. Because humans experiencing nightmares generate a substantial amount of Dark-type energy for Darkrai, who seeks to grow stronger quickly, causing a city's humans to have nightmares is a relatively fast method. Darkrai waited obediently at the door. About a quarter of an hour later, Dak came back after shopping. What's wrong? Dak noticed something was off with Darkrai. Because Darkrai's mood of being upset was quite evident on his face, Pokémon are definitely not as good at hiding their emotions as humans. After all, they're very straightforward creatures. Dak. Darkrai told Dak about what had happened. The gist of it was that someone had disguised themselves as Dak, with unknown intentions. But Darkrai felt, anyway, it definitely wasn't to do something good, so he directly captured that person. Where is he? Dak asked with a frown. Disguised as him? It's not that easy to impersonate someone, and to do it so well that even Darkrai couldn't notice the difference. This sounds very much like the ability of a familiar devil fruit. As for this person's purpose, it's not too hard to guess. Mostly it's because Dak and Darkrai are overly protective of the eggs, making the person think there might be something valuable in the baby carriage, hence the attempt to steal it. Dak. Darkrai created a mini dark void in his hand. Good. Let's go back and deal with this impolite gentleman. Dak nodded, understanding Darkrai's intention, glanced at the dark sky, and walked with Darkrai towards a nearby cafe. Opening the door, they stepped inside. And just like that, they were back at the Pokémon nursery. Release that guy. Dak decided to see who was so bold before even placing the items he bought. Dak. Darkrai nodded and pointed into the air with his hand. As the dark void appeared, a figure also fell out of it. Dak approached for a closer look, furrowing his brow, then started to think. This person looked familiar to him. Staring for a while, Dak couldn't figure out who it was exactly. Characters from the 2D world look quite abstract when viewed in 3D. Characters that might look very attractive in 2D might not stand out much in 3D, with many people having similar facial features. For example, Megumi Kato from Sikano, How to Raise a Boring Girlfriend. Although she looks exceptionally beautiful as a 2D character from the attitudes of other characters in the anime, Megumi Kato seems to be just an ordinary girl with a somewhat low presence. However, Dak had a guess about this person's real identity, based on the ability Darkrai mentioned earlier. Dak, lift him up. Dak thought for a moment and asked Darkrai to suspend Bon Clay in midair with his hands. Dak circled around Bon Clay, and when he moved behind him, he suddenly opened his eyes wide. Indeed, it's Bon Clay, the person who would join the Baroque works as the assassin Mr. 2 in the future, and also a key figure in helping Luffy escape from the underwater prison in Down. But now it seems like he's just a con artist or a petty thief in the East Blue. In Chapter 12, Bon Clay woke up groggily, just in time to meet a pair of ghostly blue eyes. Whoa, He propped himself up, moving backward with his hands and feet, then plunged headfirst into the lake. Help! Whoa! I can't swim. As soon as he fell into the lake, Bon Clay began to flail around wildly. Dak and Darkrai stood by the lakeside, quietly watching Bon Clay thrash about in the water. After about a minute or two of floundering, Bon Clay realized he wasn't sinking and gradually stopped. He stood upright in the water, not to mention his feet could touch the bottom, but he also noticed that this water seemed a bit different. It didn't weaken those with powers. Get up. Dak looked down at the person in the lake. Mr. 2 Bon Clay. That's the full name because by that point in the original story, Bon Clay had become an Okama. So, in the Baroque works, his name was the most special, having both a male numeric code and a female holiday code. And he had no partner, working solo on internal assassination missions. Who are you? And what exactly is this creature? Bon Clay climbed out of the lake, standing on the grass inside the shop, warily looking at Dak and the uniquely featured Darkrai. He raised his arm and a leg, striking a strange pose that Dak thought looked a bit like the crane and goose shapes in a Jackie Chan movie. However, at this moment, Bon Clay also suddenly realized something, looking down at his hands in panic. What's going on? Explaining this is a bit complicated. I'll give you 2 choices now, and whether I explain further will depend on your choice. Dak smirked, his smile not reaching his eyes, as he spoke to Bon Clay. You say. Bon Clay's expression turned ugly. He knew he had picked the wrong target this time. In the vast East Blue, Devil Fruit users were few and far between, and Bon Clay's past successes had made him overly confident. Unfortunately, this time he had kicked an iron plate made of titanium alloy. Although I don't know what you intended to do, it's definitely no good. So you have 2 choices. Die or join the nursery and become one of our employees. Dak's smile gradually turned sinister. He considered himself kind and benevolent, but that was when others didn't provoke him. It was either not act at all or act decisively. In Dak's view, there was no such thing as merely crippling or maiming. The consequences of Whitebeard not decisively killing Blackbeard couldn't have been clearer. As for the deceit involved in this grudge, on these seas, such minor grievances are far too common and hardly count for anything. Nami initially kidnapped Luffy to hand over to Buggy, even taking away the Going Merry and treasure, but Luffy and his crew still chose to help her. Frankie initially beat up Usopp and stole their 300 million berries for ship repairs, yet later, Luffy and his crew still chose to save him. Luffy and Crocodile were mortal enemies in Alabasta, yet later they fought side by side in Impel Down and Marineford. Deceiving? Such petty matters. What matters is the person, whether Bon Clay can demonstrate the loyalty he showed after joining them. That's what Dak values most. The Pokemon Nursery's companions might be nobodies, but they must never be ones who would betray their comrades. Looks like I don't have a choice. Bon Clay's cheeks twitched as he chose to compromise. Good. Welcome to the Pokemon Nursery. I'm Dak, the manager of the nursery, and this is my family, Darkrai. From now on, you're also our partner. Dak's expression changed from gloomy to a happy smile as he extended his hand to Bon Clay. This happiness contained no deceit. He was genuinely pleased about the nursery's expansion. You change fast, huh? My name is Bon Clay. People from the East Blue call me Bon Clay of the Wilds. Bon Clay shook hands with Dak, then looked towards Darkrai. By the way, what's the deal with your family member here? That's a long story. Don't rush. Do you have any other companions? Dak glanced at Darkrai, somewhat dreading the need to explain Pokemon later. No, I've always been alone. Bon Clay stated plainly, as if there was nothing unusual about it. On these seas, too many people eke out a solitary existence. Loneliness is a common state of human existence here, not something to dwell deeply on. No worries from now on. You're not alone anymore. The Pokemon Nursery is your home. No matter where you go, you can always come back here to rest quickly. Dak smiled, then took out a token and handed it to Bon Clay. What's this? A token, let me explain a bit about our Pokemon Nursery and Pokemon. Dak led Bon Clay to sit under a tree. He went to get 3 towels, handed one to Bon Clay, one to Darkrai, and then started to wipe the eggs with Darkrai, giving them a bath. As Dak completed his daily tasks, he recounted to Bon Clay the same things he had told Whitebeard and others. From the start with an expressionless face to the end with a devastated look, it only took about 15 minutes for Bon Clay. Are you okay?" Bon Clay was about to say that, but feeling the suppressed power in his body and being unable to use his devil fruit abilities, he closed his mouth again. "Now you understand. Stealing the eggs is like stealing the future of our Pokémon nursery. They're the children we must carefully look after and protect with our lives." Dak nodded, his mouth dry from explaining so much. And as you've seen, Darkrai is very fond of these children, so he won't allow anyone to harm them. "I see, Pokémon, right? The existence of such creatures is too fantastical. Not something you'd expect from this cruel sea." Bon Clay nodded, looking at the egg he was wiping, a mix of yellow and pink. If you put your sincere feelings into it, you'll definitely gain their trust. Can such wonderful things really happen in this world? Everyone has experienced betrayal, and everyone has had experiences where their emotions and efforts were not reciprocated. Pokémon, however, negate such occurrences. Why not witness for yourself the magic and potential of Pokémon? Whether they're worth risking your life to love, you'll naturally find out. From now on, you'll take care of the egg in your hands. Maybe it will really like you when it hatches. Dak glanced at the egg in Bon Clay's hands. It was one of the remaining 2 purple potential eggs, uncertain what Pokémon it would hatch into. "Thank you." Bon Clay was silent for a moment, then nodded, suddenly feeling a sense of responsibility and burden on his shoulders, something he never felt in his aimless life before. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 13, Congratulations, Host, on acquiring an employee. Reward: Employee Dormitory, 1,000 Pokecoins. Note: Employees at the Pokemon Nursery will not have their strength suppressed and do not need to purchase Pokemon. They only need to gain the Pokemon's and the manager's approval. Wow, an unexpected gain. Dak's eyes lit up instantly, as if they were fitted with light bulbs. The employee dormitory wasn't the main point. The real deal was the 1,000 Pokecoins. There's so much he could do with those 1,000 Pokecoins. That's a considerable fortune, equivalent to 10 million berries. "What's up?" Bon Clay was still focused on wiping the Pokemon egg, only to hear Dak suddenly say something that seemed nonsensical to him. "It's nothing. Just check if your strength has been restored." "Let me see, it really has." Upon hearing Dak's words, Bon Clay carefully placed the egg on the grass and tried to exert some force. Surprised to feel his strength return, he looked at Dak in amazement. "How did this happen?" "Now that you're a part of the Pokemon Nursery, the suppression that affects outsiders naturally doesn't apply." Dak explained matter-of-factly. "This is amazing. If we lure those big-time pirates here, couldn't we easily take their heads for a bounty? Wouldn't that solve all our store's development issues?" Bon Clay clenched his fist, beginning to contemplate how to use this rule to hunt down pirates with bounties. "No, we're running a business here, and integrity is key. We can't do that, or else it would dare to come here to shop in the future. We cannot actively antagonize any forces and must try to maintain a neutral stance, not getting involved in disputes between 2 forces unless they strike first or break the rules. Otherwise, we cannot act. Your identity has changed now. You're no longer the free agent you used to be, but a member of the Pokemon Nursery. It's important to maintain the nursery's reputation and standing externally. Got it?" Dak immediately shook his head to dispel Bon Clay's idea. The development of the Pokemon Nursery mainly relies on completing main quests or through Pokecoins. It's a slow and steady process, and chasing after a few pirates' bounties, risking making others afraid to do business with them, is a short-sighted approach. Selling Pokemon eggs, or Pokemon, then providing various services related to Pokemon, that's the sustainable business model that can continue indefinitely. Although it might be slower to earn money this way at the start, it's a model that can grow steadily and sustainably. As for Bon Clay's suggestion, once the money from the bounties is gone, there's no further income. "All right," Bon Clay nodded, accepting this explanation. It wasn't his fault, as his identity had just changed, and Dak hadn't informed him about the Pokecoins and main quest. "Come with me. Let's check out the employee dormitory." Dak looked around and noticed a new door on another wall, presumably the entrance to the employee dormitory. The door was located to the left, leading Dak to guess that a female employee dormitory door might appear to the right in the future. Oh, sure. Bon Clay's eyebrows lifted, curious about where he would be living. The two approached the door, and Dak pulled it open. Dak's bedroom was no different, except that only Dak and Darkrai lived there, while this space was for all male employees. Though, currently, Bon Clay was the only employee. Inside were 4 single beds, with bedding already prepared. It's getting dark today. Go out and buy some necessities tomorrow. Dak handed the remaining 20-some thousand berries to Bon Clay, who nodded and accepted without saying much. He was someone who lived day by day, spending whatever he earned, without any luggage or savings. Did we have no customers today? Dak exited the employee dormitory and looked towards the store's entrance, now covered by a curtain. As Dak was about to spend the 1,000 Poke coins in the Poke Mart, the curtain at the store's entrance was suddenly lifted. Welcome to the Pokemon Nursery. He immediately closed the mart, focusing on the store's entrance. A puzzled voice sounded, and the person at the entrance paused before stepping into the store. What's wrong, Dak? Bon Clay, hearing Dak's voice, came out and first looked at Dak standing in place, then at the person opposite him. Why is he here? The next moment, his entire body tensed, instinctively adopting a combat stance, with sweat breaking out on his forehead rapidly. Bon, stay calm. Every guest is a visitor. Although Dak was also somewhat surprised, he gestured to Bon Clay to remain calm. The visitor was a man who had gained a notorious reputation on the seas over the past 2 years, many calling him the world's greatest swordsman. However, Dak thought this title was a bit premature for the man at this stage. Hey Dak, this guy is one of the 7 warlords of the sea, a representative of the world government. Bon Clay couldn't remain as calm as Dak in the presence of this man. Being a native pirate, he had grown up immersed in the strength of various powers, feeling the deterrence of the 7 warlords of the sea more directly than Dak. Bon, you can't speak that way about a guest. Dak walked up and tapped Bon Clay on the head. This action somewhat calmed Bon Clay, who then remembered the terrifying suppression power of their shop. Now, this warlord shouldn't be able to defeat him, right? Thinking this, Bon Clay relaxed and lowered his guard to observe how Dak would handle the guest, having never served one himself. Welcome, Mr. Mihawk. Are you here to buy eggs? Dak nodded at Bon Clay's composure, then turned and bowed slightly to the newcomer. Mihawk didn't respond, not even lifting his gaze to Dak or Bon Clay. He drew his giant black sword, Uru, with one hand and swung it to the side, then narrowed his eyes. His instincts were correct. His entire body was under some form of invisible suppression, reducing his physical capabilities to those of an ordinary person. Even a simple swing of his sword felt tiring. The only thing not suppressed was probably his combat experience and swordsmanship, the software aspects. Interesting. End of Chapter 14. Chapter 14. Is this a store? Mihawk began to take an interest in Dak only after sensing the unique suppressive force within the nursery. Had this been just any ordinary store, he would have already left. Yes. Dak smiled and nodded. At this moment, Darkrai also came over, holding an egg. Mihawk stared at Darkrai for a while before shifting his gaze to the egg, which he quickly moved away from. Clearly, he had no interest in these colorful ostrich eggs, not planning on making egg fried rice or anything of the sort for dinner. Observing Mihawk's evident disinterest, Dak just smiled lightly. Knowing these original characters well, he was clear on how to persuade them to buy Pokemon eggs, understanding which individuals could be sold to and which could not. Piquing Mihawk's interest in Pokemon was easy. Very easy. This is Darkrai, my family, and also a Pokemon. Dak first introduced Darkrai before continuing. And this is an egg that can hatch into various Pokemon. There are over 1,000 Pokemon species, each with unparalleled potential and charm. Oh, Mihawk responded indifferently, but his gaze lingered on the egg, showing a slight interest. Among them, some Pokemon are special, born with a high talent in the realm of swordsmanship. At higher levels, they can become very powerful swordsmasters. If you have the patience, You could even train one to surpass yourself as the world's greatest swordsman. Huh. Although it was still a one-word response, Dak could hear anticipation in Mihawk's tone this time. Talking about it might not convince you. So how about a duel with Darkrai? Although he's not a Pokemon specialized in swordsmanship, it could still prove the potential of Pokemon. A cunning glint appeared in Dak's eyes. At this point in time, with Shanks having lost an arm, Mihawk was without a rival, likely leading a mundane life. It wasn't hard to guess that he was in need of something interesting to spice up his existence. It would be 9 years before Zoro entered his view. Instead of letting Mihawk wait idly for 9 years, it was better to let him train a powerful sword master himself. Considering how Mihawk had taken care of Perona in the original story, a Pokemon under Mihawk's care would presumably not be mistreated and could be considered a decent customer. All right, Mihawk smirked, turning to walk outside. Since Mihawk had left the door open when he entered, the outside remained as he had found it. Dak looked outside to see a forest, not at all a place suitable for human habitation. Bon, want to come and watch? Dak turned to Bon Clay. Yes. Boncle nodded vigorously. How strong Mihawk was, how strong Darkrai was, and what abilities and potential Pokemon possessed were all things he was extremely curious about. All right, let's all go. Dak nodded and led Bon Clay and Darkrai outside. The outside was indeed a forest, but further away, a castle could be seen, leaving its location a mystery. Looking back, they saw a neatly built cabin, which didn't seem like something Mihawk would construct. After stepping outside, Mihawk looked at his hands, feeling his strength fully restored. He was also curious about how his home had turned into a shop. Though curious, he was more eager for the upcoming battle. Go Darkrai. Dak. Darkrai didn't waste words, nor did he prepare specially, simply floating forward quietly. Sorry, Darkrai seems to think you're not much of a challenge, so his fighting spirit is a bit low. Dak spoke to Mihawk with a smile. Darkrai glanced at his unscrupulous manager, beginning to understand a bit about his partner's modus operandi. Dak might not fully understand what Darkrai meant given their current level of closeness, but he said it anyway. Is that so? Mihawk's eyes narrowed, his gaze becoming dangerous. He had his pride. Without drawing his giant black sword, Yuru, he instead took out a small dagger from around his neck, making his contempt for Darkrai clear. Dak maintained a smiling demeanor, knowing his provocation had worked. Just surprising Mihawk would create a significant gap in expectations and a strong interest in Pokemon. Then it would be customer plus one. Finding a high-quality human like Mihawk, who was powerful, didn't cause trouble, could do housework, and had a cold exterior but a warm heart, was hard. To find a good home for his Pokemon babies, Dak had really gone out of his way, almost stopping at nothing. This whole process even moved Dak himself. Then, please make your move, Mihawk. Dak gestured with an open hand. Quite arrogant. Since becoming one of the 7 warlords of the sea, no one had dared to look down on him like this. For Mihawk, this was a rare experience. Mihawk made no pleasantries, launching a huge green flying slash as his opening move, attacking Darkrai with a world-splitting force. Shadow Clone. At Dak's command, Darkrai instantly created numerous clones, momentarily confusing even Dak as to which was the real one. However, Mihawk immediately identified Darkrai's true form and charged forward. Shadow clones are useless against observation hockey. This was a test, and the outcome left Dak slightly disappointed. Now, with Mihawk moving swiftly, he was too fast for Dak's naked eye. Dark Void, but that didn't stop Dak from continuing to direct the battle. Pirates' fighting styles were simple, mostly relying on close combat. Especially for a non-Devil Fruit user like Mihawk. If it were Logia users like Law, Apu, or Robin, Dak might not easily predict their actions. But predicting Mihawk, who was simply closing in on Darkrai to enter his attack range, was straightforward. Thus, dealing with him became easy. Darkrai released a giant Dark Void from its center. Mihawk's eyes widened as he realized the Dark Void was upon him. Unable to retreat in time, he stabbed forward with his dagger. Armament hockey is useless good. Dak nodded, satisfied with this outcome. though he couldn't help but remark on Mihawk's action being similar to using Kunai against Zetsu. As expected, Mihawk was knocked unconscious into the dark void on impact. In a head-on fight, Darkrai might have defeated Mihawk, but it would have required some effort. Unfortunately, most Pokémon don't need to engage in physical combat. Ghost, flying, and psychic types, for instance, might not even be touched by physical attacks. People from the world of pirates are so simple in battle. End of chapter 15. Chapter 15, that's a move. Having witnessed the brief battle, Bon Clay couldn't contain his excitement. He remembered being taken down by that same move, plunging into that dark space, and knowing nothing until he woke up in the store. If a warlord of the sea could be taken down instantly, and so could he, then that means the display of Shadow Clone by Darkrai also left him shocked. If it were him, he wouldn't know which one to attack. At this point, Bon Clay had no idea what hockey was. In the East Blue, a place considered minor, just being a Devil Fruit user was deemed powerful, and Logia users were virtually unbeatable, with no concept of hockey. Amazing, right? Now you see why I said our Pokemon have limitless potential. Yeah, so powerful. If every Pokemon could eventually reach this level. Wait, Dak, are you really planning to hand them over to others? Initially excited, Bon Clay suddenly remembered their nursery's mission and looked worried. Are you concerned that others might turn against us with such power? Dak immediately understood Bon Clay's worries. Well, firstly, although the little ones haven't hatched yet, that doesn't mean they can't feel our presence. Since they're from us, they'll naturally have a good impression of us and won't want to harm us. Secondly, our Pokemon nursery isn't just about this one transaction. We offer many services and products for Pokemon that only we provide. Even if someone wanted to harm us, they'd have to consider whether other customers would agree. Lastly, I plan to establish a transcendent force. By that time, we should be the most powerful organization in the world. I don't believe anyone would foolishly seek their own destruction. Dak smiled, sharing his thoughts with Bon Clay. It was only then that Bon Clay began to grasp the future path of their Pokemon nursery. What kind of force? The Pokémon League? That's still in my imagination for now, a bit far off. Let's not rush. Once our nursery grows a bit more, with more people, we can establish it. Dak thought about the Pokémon Leagues in various regions of the Pokémon world, feeling a mix of excitement and anticipation. Not just the Pokémon League, but Pokémon Academies, regional competitions, gyms, Pokémon centers. He planned to establish all these, though they were still just ideas. Right now, their Pokémon nursery was simply too poor. Should we try to recruit Mihawk? He's a powerful force. Understanding Dak's vision, Bon Clay offered his suggestion. Their Pokémon nursery was indeed in dire need of both established talents and those with potential. These individuals didn't necessarily need to be powerful in combat, but they should at least possess some unique skills. Dak frowned, pondering the suggestion. He was uncertain whether Mihawk would join them. Initially, he thought Mihawk wouldn't join any organization, as his character was to be independent. However, later, Mihawk formed an organization with Buggy and Crocodile. Moreover, that was Mihawk 11 years later. Currently, at the prime age of 32 and at the peak of his youth, his pride was evident. Convincing him to become an employee would be exceedingly difficult. Let's try, yeah. Dak nodded, agreeing to give a shot. Who knows? Mihawk, having been instantly defeated by Darkrai, might become highly interested in their Pokemon nursery and decide to join. It didn't matter if he didn't. Dak believed his sales pitch had already sufficiently piqued Mihawk's interest in purchasing a Pokemon egg. Under such circumstances, Dak and the others returned to the store. Then, they had Darkrai release Mihawk from the dark void. Mihawk fell to the floor from the dark space, waking up in less than a second. About to draw his sword, he realized his strength was suppressed. Coming to his senses, he looked around and remembered what had happened. Devil Fruit ability? Mihawk looked keenly at Darkrai. Indeed, his curiosity about Pokemon had reached its peak, bewildered by the power that made him suddenly fall asleep. He also confirmed that the man before him was a legitimate businessman, only interested in commerce, not in any nefarious activities, or he could have killed him. No, even now he could. Mihawk shifted his gaze to Dak, beginning to take seriously the young man who had commanded that powerful creature. Not exactly. That's the power of Pokémon. Most Pokémon possess special abilities, like emitting electricity or breathing fire as basic skills. Affecting weather or altering terrain is also not difficult. Of course, this depended on the Pokémon's type and skill set, but there was no need to elaborate on that. Interesting, you've convinced me. I'll take all those eggs. Mihawk's lips curved slightly, speaking with an air of pride. Well, there's no rush for that. I wonder, Mr. Mihawk, are you interested in joining us? No interest. Mihawk immediately declined Dak's offer without a second thought. All right, maybe you'll be more interested after learning more about our Pokémon nursery. Dak nodded, unsurprised. Mihawk knew very little about the Pokémon nursery at this point, not even aware of the concept of other worlds, making it hard for him to consider joining. However, we have a rule here. For the first transaction, you can only choose one Pokémon egg to take with you. We need to ensure you have the capability to nurture a young Pokémon to healthily mature. After confirming this, we can consider more transactions. Dak shook his head, rejecting Mihawk's idea of buying all the eggs. Even the world's strongest man had to abide by their rules. Why would Mihawk be an exception? Truthfully, Dak was worried. Mihawk didn't seem like someone capable of caring for children. Could he be a good poke dad? However, Dak didn't dwell on this, continuing to convey to Mihawk the same message he had told Whitebeard. Their Pokémon nursery would firmly stand by the Pokémon, doing everything to protect them. Appealing to emotions and reason, with a hint of threat and request, it was all about hoping for the Pokémon to be well treated. Mihawk, although aloof, wasn't foolish and understood the intention behind Dak's words, hence he didn't feel displeased. So, please choose your partner. End of Chapter 16. Chapter 16 at this moment. Only 8 eggs remained under the tree. One had been sold to the Whitebeard pirates, a purple-grade egg costing 1 million berries, which used up all their funds. Another was left for the employee, Bon Clay, to care for, also of purple grade. Whether it could become Bon Clay's partner would depend on the little one's attitude after hatching. The remaining 8 eggs consisted of 1 white, 3 green, 3 blue, and 1 purple. Dak quietly watched Mihawk approach the 8 eggs. Although Mihawk wasn't the first customer, he was the first to enter the nursery of his own accord. This one, Mihawk didn't seem like the type to get caught up in indecision. He casually pointed at a deep yellow egg, then turned to look at Dak. 100,000 berries. Dak glanced over. Perfect. Mihawk, a chosen one, had picked the only remaining white egg. Truth be told, green and blue eggs were of average quality, and even though the probability of purple-grade eggs was higher than that of white ones, white-grade eggs could potentially be problematic. Dak wondered if Mihawk would come after him with a sword if he found out about this. Though a flicker of confusion passed through Mihawk's eyes, he didn't bother to ask too many questions. Like Whitebeard and his crew before, he found it odd that such potentially powerful creatures were sold for so little. However, Mihawk didn't consider that perhaps only this egg was priced so low and others might cost more. Looking down, Mihawk was momentarily puzzled. He never kept money on him, despite his strength and renown. If he were wealthy, he wouldn't need to live in someone else's leftovers. Typically, it was the foolishly brave bounty hunters who provoked him, whose heads he would then exchange for money to buy supplies until it ran out. If he didn't bring money, other items of equal value to 100,000 berries are acceptable. We can exchange them ourselves. Dak offered a solution upon noticing Mihawk's awkwardness. After hearing this, Mihawk nodded and handed Dak the dagger from his neck. Enough. Not only was it enough, but it also exceeded the amount. According to the system's evaluation, the dagger was worth no less than 800,000 berries, though its material was unknown. Mihawk nodded, holding the deep yellow egg and turning towards the door. Wait, this is a medium for entering our nursery, a pocket token. Simply hold it and open any door to enter our Pokémon nursery. We welcome your next visit. Dak handed Mihawk a jade token, which he held with a slight daze. After all, Dak seemed to be speaking of something quite extraordinary. Mihawk, however, showed little interest categorizing it as some sort of devil fruit ability or Pokemon power, then walked out with a swagger. What do we do now? Bon Clay watched the door close again and asked, Tell the eggs a bedtime story, then rest. It's getting late. A story? Yes, you're responsible for your egg. Just talk to it about anything, your past experiences or sightseeing, to build a connection. Dak acted as if it was the most natural thing. Although it felt odd for Bon Clay to speak to an egg, it wasn't something he couldn't accept. About half an hour later, after completing their daily tasks, Dak and Bon Clay returned to their rooms. Let's tackle the main quest tomorrow. First, let's see how to spend those 1,000 Poke coins. Dak opened the Pokemart, looking for items that could directly enhance his combat capabilities. Mihawk's speed today was so fast, it was invisible to the naked eye, meaning if Mihawk had intended to kill him, Dak would have been in real trouble. This instilled a sense of urgency in Dak to strengthen himself. Evergreen Force Seed, 100k Poke Coins Psychic Seed, 100k Poke Coins Aura Guidance Seed, 100k Poke Coins. The most direct upgrades were these special powers from the Pokemon world. However, it seemed he could only purchase the seeds of such abilities, with each seed costing 1 billion berries, and every level upgrade requiring 100k Poke Coins, which was undoubtedly expensive for Dak at the moment. Cheaper options were auxiliary training items, usable by both Pokemon and humans. Aside from these, there wasn't much else that could enhance combat ability. The Pokemart mainly offered items related to Pokemon, with only a few functional consumables applicable to humans. 1,000 Poke Coins could buy a not-solo-level Pokemon, but I already have Darkrai. After much deliberation, Dak found almost nothing useful in the Pokemart for his situation. Pokespin, unsure where to spin but itching to do so, Dak opened the Forbidden Wheel. 100 Poke Coins per spin, exactly enough for a 10 spin. The system is tempting me. With gritted teeth and gleaming eyes, Dak decisively opted for a 10-spin draw. Congratulations on receiving Berry Gift Pack X1, Berry Mixer X1, Armament Hockey LV.1, Random Pokemon Egg X10, 100k Belly, 3-dimensional enhancement level 1, 1M Belly, New Moon Feather, Bound X1, keep 200k Belly, convert 200k into 200 Poke Coins, then check my personal panel. Dak was exhilarated. His first 10-spin draw was of exceptionally high quality, possibly a marketing strategy by the system, but he made a huge profit from this round. Dak, Identity, Pokemon Nursery Manager, Novice Breeder Abilities, Strength LV.2, Agility LV.2, Stamina LV.2, Breeding LV.1, Conqueror's Hockey LV.10, Armament Hockey LV.1, Talent Detection Pokemon, Darkrai, LV.100, Balance, 200k Belly, 200 Poke Coin Special Items, New Moon Feather, Bound, Berry Mixer. A significant boost in combat capability. Dak raised a fist, which turned pitch black, showcasing his newfound strength. If one disregards the max-level Conqueror's Hockey, Dak might still be a small fry in the Grand Line, but would already be quite formidable in the 4 Seas. He could easily claim a few million berries as bounty. The only downside was, despite his physical enhancements, he still lacked combat skills and experience. Opening the berry gift pack scattered 100 berries across the bedroom floor, featuring a variety of species only found in the Pokemon world. However, there were no exceptionally rare or powerful berries among them, mostly common with a few rare ones, but none with significant effects. Dak had Darkrai move the berries to the crafting room. End of Chapter 17. Chapter 17. Let's check out the 10 new eggs first. Consider it restocking. Dak stretched and yawned, already feeling sleepy. Still, he mustered up the energy to step out of his room to see the 10 eggs now situated under the tree. The newly appeared 10 eggs were clearly separated from the remaining 7 on either side of the tree, making it easy for Dak to distinguish between them. As a breeder, he knew he was far from qualified, lacking practical experience in caring for Pokemon, not to mention estimating the hatching time of the eggs by their sheen and color. Talent detection, white X1 green, X4 blue, X4 purple, X1, green and blue are average qualities, got that right. White probably represents troublemakers, and purple are the neighbor's kids. Dak assessed the eggs' quality distribution, getting a rough idea of the talent levels among Pokémon eggs. Regarding the higher orange, gold, and red grades, since no such eggs had appeared yet, Dak could only guess their patterns. Orange grade likely appears more in pseudo-legendary species, followed by starter Pokémon or those with higher base stats. Gold grade would mostly belong to legendary Pokémon like Darkrai, Red, and Ash's Pikachu. Dak, at that moment, Darkrai, noticing Dak was not sleeping, floated out of the room. Immediately spotting the new eggs under the tree, it floated excitedly around them, showing great interest. However, Darkray's excitement didn't last long. It suddenly sensed an aura it found repulsive. Turning its head, Darkrai saw Dak holding a light yellow feather, seemingly radiating specks of moonlight. New Moon Feather, a feather from Cresselia, said to grant its holder beautiful dreams every night, or even allow one to meet the soul of a deceased loved one in their dreams, after which the feather turns to ash. The effect is triggered based on the holder's desires. Cresselia, a legendary Pokémon known as the Lunar Pokémon, naturally repels Darkrai, known as the Nightmare Pokémon, due to their opposing natures. This isn't about good or evil, but rather a natural aversion stemming from their species' traits. Although it's not impossible for these Pokémon species to be friends, just unlikely. Holding the feather, Dak felt a serene peace, as if he could lie down and have a wonderful dream right away. But the meeting a deceased soul in dreams part made him speculate. Quickly, Dak opened the Pokemart to check the price of the New Moon Feather. Pokemart, New Moon Feather, 10k Pokecoins, worth 1 billion berries. This price seemed high for just a feather. If it were merely about having beautiful dreams, it probably wouldn't be worth so much. His speculation wasn't wrong. Meeting a deceased soul, this wasn't about encountering a fabricated person in dreams based on one's thoughts, but a real meeting with a deceased soul, a feature not originally in the feather, but added by the system. Such a feature justified its billion-berry price tag. 1 billion berries. That's about the cost of an ancient Zoan-type devil fruit, which could change a lot in this world dominated by pirates. In this world, if you ask anyone whether they'd prefer a devil fruit or meeting with a deceased soul, most would choose the former for survival and future prospects. But that doesn't mean the latter isn't worth 1 billion berries. If the feather and its function were known across the seas, everyone would clamor for it, with some even willing to pay tens or hundreds of billions of berries. Exaggeration? Not all. Not to mention people like Nami, Chopper, Neptune, Senior Pink in 10 years. Even now, Sengoku, Zeph, Lautaro, Jinbei, Robin, Brooke, Rayleigh, the Akazeya 9, these individuals would surely want this feather. This is indeed an incredible find. Dak held the light yellow feather in his hand. If he wasn't so familiar with the characters of One Piece, it wouldn't matter. But knowing them well, he understood the feather's value. Unexaggeratedly, this feather could fetch the equivalent of 10k Pokecoins in his hands, equating to a max-level special ability. But Dak's gaze shifted to the word bound. Clearly, this wasn't something he could sell. The system didn't intend for him to exploit this loophole, wanting him to focus on running the nursery. Bound, not tradable, but could be used by the owner or given to someone within the nursery. The message was clear. It could only be used internally. But if the system thought this would limit his development, it was sorely mistaken. Humans excel at finding loopholes. He might not be able to exchange the feather for a large number of Pokecoins, but he could trade it for a powerful ally or a potential future powerhouse. Having decided to establish a Pokémon League, the league would inevitably need loyal and strong members. Strength was easy to come by in a world with devil fruits and hockey, not to mention Pokemon. But loyalty was a challenge. Even within the Whitebeard pirates, with their close-knit atmosphere, there was Teach and the easily swayed Squad. The seas were no different. Dak preferred to cultivate characters from the original story who might not have been strong but were loyal, like some officers of the Don Quixote family, a few of Moria's subordinates, Mr. One from Baroque Works, etc. Having read the original story, Dak knew quite a few such characters. The only uncertainty was whether these individuals had already joined the organizations they were meant to join in the future. If not, he could intercept them. Otherwise, he would let it be. Dak. Time to sleep. We'll talk more tomorrow. See where we end up. End of Chapter 18. Chapter 18. For the next 7 days, Dak, along with Darkrai, wandered outside and completed tasks. Bon Clay was responsible for looking after the shop. With the nursery's suppressive power, nobody dared to cause trouble. Bon Clay has become familiar with the nursery by now and could manage the shop all by himself without any issues. In these 7 days, about 10 customers came, and many just opened the door and left without entering, probably because the unfamiliar environment or the suppressive force made them feel alert and uneasy. Those people wouldn't know what they missed out on. They might only have this one opportunity in their entire life to accidentally enter the Pokemon nursery. Among the 10 customers who came in, there were no familiar faces to Dak. All were some passerby characters not mentioned in the original story, with various identities, including ordinary farmers, pirates, businessmen, nobles. One of the pirates who tried to rob was dealt with by Bon Clay. As for the businessmen and nobles, they were judged not to have the right temperament to own Pokemon. After a brief exchange, Dak was certain they would not treat Pokemon well, so he directly sent them out. The farmer was a kind and elderly gentleman in his 60s from an unnamed village in the West Sea, a place where even pirates are rarely seen. But this elderly gentleman had no family, neither wife nor children, living a solitary life. He didn't think too much, took out almost all of his savings, roughly 1,000,000 berries. He could afford both the white and green eggs, so Dak picked out these 8 eggs for him. Among the 1 white and 7 green eggs, he immediately chose the white quality egg, which Dak did not inform him about the quality of the eggs beforehand. The old man chose it himself. The egg was green. Dak guessed it might be cater pie. The old man said the color of the egg looked similar to the vegetables he grew, which felt particularly dear to him, so he chose that egg. Spending 100,000 berries, Dak didn't even think of converting it to poke coins. Dak asked if he wasn't afraid of being deceived. The old man said he was already 1 foot in the grave and didn't care about being cheated. He just didn't want to be so lonely in the second half of his life. The old man left joyfully with the egg, and Dak gave him a pocket token, telling him to come to them with the egg if there was any issue. Although the old man was amazed by the function of the pocket token, he didn't dare to ask more and just nodded obediently. This was the only egg sold during these 7 days. However, the gains of these 7 days were not just that. Dak and Darkrai also went to many places and marked many coordinates. Most places were unimpressive, but one was very familiar. The city of Water 7. When Dak took Darkrai there, they could see the sea train being constructed. He even saw Tom, Frankie, and Icebug, which gave Dak some ideas. However, Dak quickly returned with Darkrai because that damn main quest was always incomplete. Quest system. Main quest. Pokemon grooming second lesson. Objective. Decorate and dress up a Pokemon, earning the heartfelt recognition of the Pokemon. Reward. Tree, lake, warm lamp, evolution. At this moment in the shop, Darkrai stood in front of a full-length mirror, clenching its fists in the reflection, furious. Its white hair was dyed red, bracelets on both wrists, a thick gold chain around its neck, and heavily made-up face, looking utterly like a disaster. How do you like it, Darkrai? This cool youth look, do you like it? Dak and Bon Clay stood on either side of Darkrai, very proud of themselves. Dak didn't know how to do makeup, so he called for Bon Clay. But he forgot. Bon Clay didn't know how to do makeup either. Even if he became a cross-dresser in the coming years, Bon Clay still wouldn't know how to do makeup. So, it was a disaster. Darkrai was angry. It took off all the messy things on its body, threw them on the ground, washed its face with lake water, and then dived into the shadows of the eggs to sulk. This is hard. Dak sat down on the grass, somewhat dejected. He had taken Darkrai outside to find some beauticians, but the aesthetic differences between humans and Pokemon were just too great. Of course, it could also be because Darkrai itself had a unique taste. Anyway, Dak could never complete this task, unable to gain Darkrai's approval, causing the development of the Pokemon nursery to almost come to a standstill. As for the daily task of 3 attribute increases, it hasn't grown to the point where it could level up yet. If Darkrai doesn't like to dress up, then let's not do it. Bon Clay looked at Dak somewhat incomprehensibly. He could understand why Dak was obsessed with grooming Darkrai. Dak didn't seem to be someone who was interested in such things. Rather, these past few days, Dak seemed to be more into researching some strange little cubes. It's not that Darkrai doesn't like to dress up, he just doesn't like the way we do it. Dak shook his head. After all, they have been together for 7 or 8 days. He had some understanding of Darkrai. Darkrai's personality is mostly casual. Regarding dressing up, he neither likes nor dislikes it. It's just that the way Dak and Bon Clay do it is too ugly. Ding dong. Just as the two were somewhat puzzled, the bell hanging above the door rang. It was the sound of the door being opened. The door curtain was lifted, and an old woman in a white coat walked in. Though described as a white-haired old woman, she stood tall and firm, without the slightest panic due to entering another place. But the surprise in her eyes was unmistakable. Upon seeing this person, Bon Clay instinctively stepped back, but he quickly remembered his changed status. Now, within this shop, there was no need to fear anyone. The old woman seemed to notice something different about herself, clenched her fist, then relaxed, and looked up to survey the shop. 2 young men in their 20s, small trees, a small lake, and a collection of colorful eggs? At that moment, the man lying on the lawn stood up, wearing a standard smile. Welcome, Madam Tsuru. End of Chapter 19. Chapter 19, the person who arrived is a Marine Vice Admiral, Chief of Staff of the Navy, and a user of the Wash Fruit ability, age 65 Tsuru. This is a crucial guest. Different from pirates scattered across the seas, the Navy has high connectivity. If Tsuru becomes a guest to the Pokémon nursery, then cooperating with the Navy in the future would be virtually secured. Dak does not believe that after arriving at such a place, Tsuru would not report this matter to Sengoku. He also does not believe that Sengoku would give up on Pokémon, a force that can quickly become powerful. However, if Tsuru has come here, then on the other side of the shop door, it should be Marine Ford, the Navy headquarters, right? Dak lifted his eyes to look outside the shop door, which was not closed. That seems to be a fairly bustling commercial street, with many civilians and occasionally a few uniformed Marines passing by. I remember entering a jewelry store, Tsuru said, standing at the shop entrance. Able to step back out immediately, she did not venture further into the shop, just standing at the entrance and looking inside, finally focusing her gaze on Dak. It's clear who's in charge here. This situation is a bit complicated to explain. Maybe come in for a talk. Dak rubbed his chin, feeling it necessary to explain to Tsuru what he had told Newgate before. Of course, it's more about explaining to Sengoku through Crane. What Sengoku decides later is another matter. Dak is a bit unsure about Sengoku's mentality at this time period and is not quite sure how Sengoku would treat the Pokémon nursery. The only thing Dak can be sure of is that Sengoku definitely would not give up the power of Pokémon. Sengoku is a bit contradictory. At this point in time, 10 years after becoming the fleet admiral, he was purely a dog of the world government, obeying the world government's commands. For example, when ordered to annihilate O'Hara, he did it directly. Issues that even vice admirals like Saul and Kazan could see, he definitely could see as well. Yet he still used the Buster Call and let Saul carry out the world government's orders obediently. No, not just Sengoku. It should be said that the entire Navy at that time was in this state, including Sakazuki, Kazan, with only Borsalino wisely playing it safe. After experiencing O'Hara and his friend's death, Kazan woke up, started to have his own thoughts, no longer blindly following the world government. Let Robin go who he saw as innocent, and gradually learned Cap style. Sakazuki was even later. Not until he became the fleet admiral did he start to defy the world government's orders. It was around that time, after experiencing the Summit War and Akiji's quitting, that the Navy truly began to change significantly, gradually having its own thoughts, no longer just the world government's puppet, and started to transform into the real Navy. But now Dak looked at Su, who clearly showed reluctance, feeling it might be a bit troublesome. If Sengoku is still in that state at this time, under Sakazuki's influence, the Pokémon nursery might unfortunately be labeled as pirates. The reasons are plentiful, such as selling biological weapons to pirates, etc. After all, the Navy and the world government are currently the strongest and largest organizations in the world. Whatever they say is right, and the lower-class civilians also believe them. Then, the Pokemon Nursery would lose most of its potential customers in the world. It shouldn't be to that extent. After all, Razanani has already died. Sengoku should have changed somewhat. Dak shook his head, scattering the worries in his heart, focusing his attention on Crane in front of him. There's a nice cafe nearby. Tsuru nodded towards Dak, indicating the outside of the shop with her chin. The suppressive force inside the shop made Tsuru feel uneasy, unwilling to venture further into such a place without understanding Dak's position and identity. Not everyone could be as carefree as Newgate and Mihawk. The former has the world's strongest spirit and confidence, and the latter has an indomitable will to become stronger, both men who would never bow to adversity. No problem, Bon Clay. Take care of the shop. Dak nodded and walked towards the shop door. It was just right. He had been considering marking the coordinates of Marineford. If a cooperation with the Navy is established in the future, then frequent visits to Marineford would be necessary. On regular days, it could also attract customers. Be careful. Bon Clay nodded and whispered to Dak. However, after seeing a group of shadows moving towards Dak's shadow from under the tree, Bon Clay relaxed again. Seeing Dak's demeanor, Tsuru's vigilance lessened somewhat. In her view, if Dak were truly a villain of extreme evil, he would not dare to follow her to Marineford, the Navy's stronghold, so carelessly. How many villains in history dared to storm into Marineford alone? Just one, and he was half mad, Golden Lion Shiki. Dak stepped out of the shop and looked around at the environment. It's just an ordinary commercial street. If there's anything different from the other places he's been to, it's the lack of various unruly elements, such as bandits, thugs, pirates, etc., are almost invisible on this street. Is this Marineford? Dak asked Tsuru beside him. Despite being described as somewhat short in the original story, Tsuru is actually about 2 meters tall, appearing shorter only because Sengoku and Garp were around. Next to Dak now, Tsuru stood a head taller. First time here. Tsuru led the way slightly ahead. Feeling her power return, her confidence was restored, appearing even more composed than when inside the shop. Normal people shouldn't be able to come here easily, right? Who said? As long as you're not a villain, you can come here. The place you can't go is over there. Hearing Dak, Tsuru knew he really didn't understand Marineford. Marineford is just an ordinary island. The extraordinary part is only the Marine base on Marineford, the true headquarters of the Navy, located in the large area to the south of Marineford. In the north of Marineford, there's a peaceful and tranquil town where Navy soldiers' families live, which is no different from other island towns, except it's peaceful and safe. Some merchant convoys and journalists checked by the Navy can also enter. Here we are, this place. Now we can talk. Who exactly are you? Tsuru led Dak to a cafe, sat down at a small round table outside, and gestured for Dak to sit as well. Well, it might be a bit hard to accept, but I hope you can remain calm. End of Chapter 20. Chapter 20. After hearing what Dak had to explain, Tsuru visibly sank into a state of shocked stupor, sitting still as if lost in deep thought. Dak did not interrupt her, allowing her to ponder. The more thoroughly she considered, the more it benefited their Pokémon Nursery. With Tsuru's intelligence, she must understand what the emergence of the Pokémon Nursery signifies. It's the harbinger of a new era. How can you prove it? Tsuru raised her eyes to Dak after coming back to her senses. Unnoticed by herself, a bead of sweat had formed on her forehead. Although she verbally expressed disbelief in Dak's words, her heart had already believed him. After all, the sudden change in the shop and the oppressive force within it couldn't be the work of any force known in their world. Now, Tsuru clung to her last hope, wishing those phenomena were the work of a devil fruit power. Go back to that shop we were just at, and see if you can find the way into my nursery again. Then you'll understand. Dak shrugged indifferently. Let's go. Tsuru stood up without a moment's hesitation. Their journey attracted many glances from the Marines, as Tsuru held a high position within the Navy, and many were curious about Dak's identity. Ordinary people don't have the privilege to walk beside Tsuru and converse with her. When Tsuru approached the doorway of the same jewelry shop and pulled it open, "Welcome back, Tsuru-sama. What would you like today?" The familiar voice of the shop assistant rang in her ears. But now, Tsuru couldn't engage in the usual small talk with her. This made her realize that what Dak had said might very well be true. Their shop doesn't exist in this world. Whether one can enter it or not is entirely up to luck. And not only does their world exist, but many other worlds do too, and in the future, they might even enter theirs. What would those people do? How powerful are they? Two questions unavoidably surfaced in Tsuru's mind. "Madam Tsuru, would you like to enter the shop?" Dak timely spoke. His tone and demeanor hadn't changed from before, but to Tsuru, it was laden with pressure. "Let's go." Tsuru nodded, her expression grave. This difference between pirates and the Navy was evident. Unlike Whitebeard and Mihawk, who wouldn't worry much about such revelations, content as long as their people were well, the Navy, like Tsuru, had to worry about the future of the Navy and the world. They preferred not to disrupt the current stability, not eager for new things to upset the balance of the seas. They had too much to consider. And this was key for Dak to win over the Navy as a major cooperative client. "Please." Dak motioned for Tsuru to come out from the jewelry shop, then deliberately closed the shop door in her view and reopened it. The same place, the same door, but a completely different interior. This undoubtedly gave Tsuru another psychological nudge, making her even more inclined to believe Dak's words. Click-clack. Finally unable to hold back, Tsuru confronted Dak. "Who exactly are you? What are you trying to do? Didn't I make it clear, Madam Tsuru? I'm just a humble nursery owner and a breeder. My duty is to find reliable families for these children and to provide services for them in the days to come." Dak gestured towards the eggs beneath the tree. His words contained no falsehood, merely omitting some details. Those details couldn't be disclosed because neither the world government nor the Navy would allow a more powerful force to overshadow them. What exactly are Pokémon? As you can see, they're powerful, magical, beautiful, cute, and loyal creatures. They will be the most trustworthy partners and family members for humans. Dak waved his hand. Darkrai emerged from Dak's shadow, appearing before Tsuru's trembling eyes. This fellow managed to take down one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Mihawk, in one strike. At this moment, Bon Clay specifically mentioned this, timing his words perfectly. Dak mentally applauded Bon Clay. His intervention was spot on. Bon Clay, who had a past as a thief, was adept at coaxing and deceiving people. Such a person was bound to make a fortune in business. Dracul Mihawk was defeated by this creature in one strike. Tsuru's eyes widened as she looked at the bizarrely appearing Darkrai. She didn't sense a formidable aura from Darkrai, feeling it was no different from any ordinary creature. No, Mr. Mihawk isn't dead. He's now one of our clients. Just a week ago, he took an egg from us, seemingly planning to train a swordsman to defeat him. Mr. Mihawk is truly an admirable client, always on the path to seeking greater strength. Dak casually conversed with Tsuru. However, the information revealed in just a few sentences was enough for Tsuru to ponder deeply. As Dak had anticipated, Tsuru was drawn into contemplation. As the Navy's chief of staff, she always thought too much. Any piece of information would inevitably lead her to consider a plethora of issues. Based on her understanding of that man, Dak's words were mostly true. Mihawk is only interested in 2 types of people, those stronger than himself and those with the potential to become stronger. So, Madam Tsuru, we recently received several new eggs. Choosing now might get you a very potential one. Dak's words lingered in Tsuru's ears like the whispers of a demon. You won't buy? Others have already bought. When others have Pokémon, your Navy doesn't. By later? By the time others have trained their Pokémon, you'll still be nursing yours. Coincidentally, today is my sister's birthday. I was planning to pick a birthday gift for her, so I'll choose from your place. Ultimately, Tsuru was persuaded by Dak. Purchasing an egg of an unknown creature wasn't much to hesitate about. It wasn't a significant loss. Even if Dak deceived her, she could just treat it as a pet. If she wasn't deceived, Then she had discovered a treasure trove of a shop, allowing the Navy to gain a vast amount of power through this shop. Perhaps their dominion over the seas would strengthen. A Navy chief of staff couldn't possibly be short of money, right, Madame Guillaume? Then, I recommend these two. End of Chapter 21. Chapter 21. Tsuru looked at the two Pokémon eggs Dak pointed out. One was a yellow egg with some brown spots, looking quite ordinary. The other was blue-gray, also not particularly attractive. What's special about these two? Tsuru glanced at the eggs without much interest, focusing instead on Dak, who had recommended these two. Do you wish for Guillaume-san to have a partner for battle, or a family member for companionship? Dak didn't answer Tsuru directly, but posed a question to her instead. Of course, I hope this little one can grow quickly and then be of help to her. That's why I recommended this egg to you, Dak said, not surprised by her response, but not being too direct. These two, 1 billion belly, the rest are much cheaper. Is that so? Tsuru understood immediately. Same eggs. Being expensive must have their reasons. Maybe the species is special, or the egg itself is special. As for the price of 1 billion berries, it's not low, but for Tsuru, it's also not too high. You said you don't know exactly which Pokemon will hatch from the eggs before they hatch, right? Indeed, I don't know what kind of Pokemon these two eggs will hatch into. At most, I can guess a few species that are more likely based on the color of the egg, but I can see through the potential of these eggs, which is also my ability as a breeder. I see. How does the egg bought by Hawk Eyes compare to these two in terms of potential? Tsuru tried to get some information out of Dak. Sorry, no comment. Dak, of course, wouldn't tell Tsuru the truth. How could he say something even Mihawk himself doesn't know? Most importantly, telling Tsuru, how does it benefit the magical breeding house? All right, let me see. Tsuru nodded and crouched down to examine the two eggs closely. May I touch them? Of course, different eggs have different textures. A skilled breeder can even determine what kind of Pokemon is inside an egg by touching its shell. Dak explained, we usually recommend eggs based on the client's identity and expectations. Pokemon are creatures that will give their all for their companions. If you choose an egg with lesser potential and you expect it to become strong, it will strive to meet your expectations. But its potential is what it is. No amount of desire can change that. It might even harm itself in the process or become depressed and develop psychological issues. We don't want to see that. So I suggested these eggs to you. Beyond that, I have no other motives. I hope you don't overthink it. The experience of Usopp in Water 7 is still vividly in Dak's mind, serving as a clear example. When an ordinary person who can only rely on hard work meets a group of both talented and hardworking companions with such a distant goal, the one under the most pressure will definitely be the ordinary person. Moreover, Usopp is not just anyone. His father is Yasopp, the sniper of the Red Hair Pirates, who also has talent. Still, Usopp felt inferior and said, I can no longer keep up with your strength, and I will only hold you back. This led to his desire to leave due to the issue with the going merry. Then what about those Pokemon with no special traits? Dak rambled on to Tsuru, who listened patiently. Of course, Mihawk's situation was an exception. Dak hadn't reacted when Mihawk made his choice. Because of this conversation, Tsuru's view of the magical breeding house began to change. Will you, in the future, become enemies with the Marines or the world government? Tsuru paused, then turned her head to directly ask Dak. She changed her initial plan of consulting with Sengoku before probing further. Influenced by Dak's words, she chose a direct approach. The stance of the magical breeding house will always remain neutral. The only people we would consider enemies are those who are insincere towards Pokemon. Tsuru-san, please convey a message to Fleet Admiral Sengoku for me. The appearance of Pokemon will herald a new era, one that will surely be better than the Great Pirate Era. Those who cannot keep up with the times are doomed to be left behind. Imagine, if every civilian could have a Pokemon, what reason would pirates have to harm them? Most civilians deserve the trust of Pokemon, but most pirates do not. Water can carry a boat, but can also capsize it. In the future, the greatest power in this sea will belong to the ordinary people, not the pirates nor the Marines. This is beyond doubt. In this era, Protecting civilians, maintaining your honor and justice in their eyes, is to secure your position and authority in the new era. You can take this as advice. I believe Fleet Admiral Sengoku, despite his faults, knows what to do. I also advise you, if you choose to raise them, treat them well, like your children. If you mistreat the Pokemon you've chosen and we find out, no matter who it is or their stance, Marines, Pirates, Shichibukai, World Government, Revolutionary Army, Celestial Dragons, anyone, we will make them wish they were dead. We have all the time in the world to seek revenge. So it's best not to let the world government research them. These words may be unpleasant, and you can choose not to believe them, but I still hope you and Gion-san treat this child well. You'll find they are very lovable creatures. Since Tsuru had asked openly, Dak chose to respond candidly, first clarifying their neutral stance. This means the Marines won't be the only clients of the magical breeding house. Their enemies could be as well. If you don't cooperate with the magical breeding house, don't blame us if you're defeated by your enemies later. Then, using Pokemon and the new era to make the Marines understand. As long as you cooperate with the magical breeding house and ensure the safety of the civilians and their Pokemon, you're essentially on the ship sailing towards the new era. Your position in the Marines in the new era can be secured. Lastly, a warning to the Marines. Don't hand over Pokemon eggs to the world government for research following their orders, or you'll be pushing the magical breeding house into an opposing stance. Consider whether the Marines can withstand the retaliation from the magical breeding house. This conversation is virtually a comprehensive dialogue with Sengoku through the air, giving him an accurate judgment and positioning of the magical breeding house. Although these are just grand words for now, whether Pokemon have such epic-making potential will soon be demonstrated, and Sengoku will have to reconsider what he said. Thank you for trusting the Marines enough to train Pokemon. We won't disappoint you. The world government has no right to take away our soldiers and family. Tsuru, after listening, nodded and picked up the yellow egg, standing up to shake hands with Dak. Although I can't represent the Marines to negotiate with you now, based on my understanding of Sengoku, I believe you will make a wise choice. If I want to come to the store again, what should I do? Dak handed the pocket token to Tsuru and explained its function to her. All right, then 1 billion berries. I will have it delivered to you tonight. Thank you for your patronage. Please take good care of this child. If any emergencies arise, feel free to come directly to the store to find me. Dak nodded. As Tsuru walked towards the store's entrance with the egg, Dak suddenly remembered something and decided to give Tsuru, or rather Sengoku, a piece of significant news. By the way, Tsuru-san, last week, in addition to a pleasant transaction with Mihawk-san, the transaction with Newgate-san was also very satisfying. The members of the Whitebeard Pirates really like the partners they chose. As you know, although the Whitebeard Pirates are pirates, their style is very trustworthy to me. They are fully qualified to become partners with Pokemon, so I had no reason to refuse the transaction, right? If Newgate-san successfully raises the Pokemon from that egg, then we will enter into comprehensive cooperation with the Whitebeard Pirates. Perhaps by then, each member of the Whitebeard Pirates will have a Pokemon. Such a scene really makes me look forward to it. Please ask Fleet Admiral Sengoku for me. Is he looking forward to it? End of Chapter 22. Chapter 22 in the Marine headquarters, inside the Fleet Admiral's office. Humph! Slam! After hearing Tsuru's recount, Sengoku slammed his palm on the desk. Who does he think he is? Daring to threaten the Marines. Although he spoke loudly and seemingly angrily, those in the office who were old friends of Sengoku could tell he wasn't really angry. If he got angry every time someone threatened or warned him, the Fleet Admiral wouldn't have lasted very long. So what's your plan? Tsuru, stroking the egg in her lap calmly, didn't even glance at Sengoku. No rush, it's all talk from his side for now. Whether these Pokemon really hold such potential is yet to be seen. Sengoku shook his head. Clearly, he wasn't planning to immediately engage in a deal with the mystery hatchery to acquire a large number of Pokemon eggs. Hatchery sounds better. First, he wasn't entirely convinced of the potential of Pokemon, despite the miraculous aspects of the mystery hatchery as described by Tsuru. Second, he needed a reason to allocate some funds from the world government, preferring to save the Marines' funds as much as possible. This would take some time. However, one thing Dak didn't misjudge was that Sengoku wouldn't give up the power of Pokemon. What about Whitebeard? He only got one egg as well, same as us. No big difference, no need to worry. When Whitebeard starts purchasing Pokemon eggs in large quantities, we can make a decision then. Sengoku wasn't in a hurry, being known as a wise leader. He wouldn't be easily provoked by Dak's overt strategy. If, as he says, Pokemon can quickly become a formidable force, then neither in terms of eligible personnel nor funds can the Whitebeard pirates match the Marines. The power disparity between the Whitebeard pirates and us will only grow, not to mention the other riffraff. Crunch, crunch. In the office, Garp was munching on his rice crackers, seemingly unconcerned. Garp, don't you have anything to say? When will you give this old man a vacation? Enough. Get out. Sengoku, furious, chased Garp out of the office. He shouldn't have asked. Zephyr, what about you? Sengoku turned his gaze to the silent, purple-haired man. Sengoku, you need to determine if we take action against the Pokemon of those pirates. What stance will that shop take? Zephyr, with his arms crossed, emanated an unmovable aura. Who about this? I'll have Gion go. After all, the egg is meant for her. Okay, Sengoku nodded. Then after a moment of silence, spoke again. If Pokemon can indeed become a significant force in a short period, I plan to clean up the seas before the pirates fully understand this power. The remaining two in the room had no objections to Sengoku's idea. Tsuru naturally followed Sengoku's thoughts, and Zephyr had long stopped involving himself in marine affairs. This matter doesn't need to be known by those below us. Until we fully understand what Pokemon are, try to keep it under wraps, especially from the world government. If those people find out about the power of Pokemon, they'll definitely do something and push the hatchery into a corner. Sengoku certainly had many thoughts on Pokemon, but until there's a clear answer on whether Pokemon truly have such potential, those are just speculations. However, one thing is advantageous for Dak. Sengoku indeed has changed compared to 10 years ago. He's begun to play political games with the world government or the Five Elders. After leaving the office, Tsuru, holding the egg, went home. As soon as she entered the yard, she saw Gion practicing swordsmanship. The future Marine Admiral candidate, Momosaji Gion, a female sword master with the standard height of an admiral, nearly 2 meters tall. She has a mole on the lower left side of her face and is known as a beauty within the Marines, with countless admirers. Of course, in the third dimension, Gion's appearance might seem a bit bizarre. Nachon, do you want egg fried rice for dinner? Gion stopped her sword practice, looking puzzledly at the approaching Tsuru. This is a Pokemon egg. It will be your child from now on. Take good care of it. Happy birthday. Tsuru handed the egg to Gion and walked inside, leaving a confused Gion standing still. Gion looked down at the egg in her hands, a bit ugly, but warm, sensing the life inside. After snapping out of her daze, Gion hurriedly followed Tsuru to ask what was going on. After hearing about the mystery hatchery and Pokemon, she was utterly baffled. It was like when humanity thought the sky was the limit, only to discover the universe instead. Suddenly, I'm a mother. Gion sat on the sofa at home, absent-mindedly stroking the eggshell. She never thought she'd experience taking care of a child, as her goal was to become a Marine Admiral, which left no time for love or family. But Tsuru's surprise, albeit a bit of a shock, was unexpected. However, Gion soon noticed the calluses on her hand from sword practice, rough and unsightly. For the first time, she felt a bit self-conscious, worried the child might reject her rough hands. But such thoughts were fleeting. The situation was too sudden for Gion to adjust her mindset immediately. After sitting with the egg for a while, she resumed her usual state. She picked up her sword Kinger with one hand and held the egg with the other, continuing her training in the yard. She wouldn't stop her journey, but from that day on, her training was no longer lonely. A new little one joined her side. The next day, Tsuru gave her a mission: to take a strange token to the mystery hatchery and ask the store manager a question. Gion was curious about the mystery hatchery and took the opportunity to visit, wondering if it was as miraculous as described. When Gion, holding the token, opened her bedroom door, and stepped in. She saw an unexpected person. Dracula Mihawk? End of Chapter 23. Chapter 23 in the hatchery. Dak and Bon were wiping eggshells when they were caught off guard by the standoff between the two newcomers. Mihawk had just entered the hatchery and hadn't even spoken when Guion followed right behind him, seemingly bearing some hostility towards Mihawk. Bon, catching on, became excited at the sight. He hadn't expected to witness such an interesting scene in the hatchery. Who knew what other entertaining events might happen here in the future? Dak didn't expect Bon to be so entertained by the situation, especially since he was still trying to figure out what was going on between the two. Perhaps the two guests would like to sit down and talk, Dak suggested, noticing their standoffish behavior. He patted the hatchery's lawn, inviting them to sit on the ground like he and Foam were. Mihawk glanced at the lawn but remained silent, standing still. His pride and aloof nature wouldn't allow him to sit on the ground. Guion didn't mind sitting, but considering she was wearing a very short skirt, she decided against it. Actually, our lawn is quite clean. After all, it will be a playground for the little ones. You can rest assured about the hygiene, Dax said, oblivious to their reluctance. Both guests exchanged looks but remained silent. It wasn't intentional rudeness. Neither wanted to be the first to speak. Cough. Well, if standing is more comfortable, then let's talk like this. Darkrai, could you check my room for some tea or something to offer our guests? Dak suggested, standing up. Dak. Darkrai emerged from the shadows and floated into Dak's bedroom. Mihawk had no reaction. However, Guion was different. This was her first time seeing a Pokémon like Darkrai, and she couldn't take her eyes off him, realizing it was the Pokémon mentioned. So, I heard you were defeated by that Pokémon. Guion suddenly smirked, looking at Mihawk with a slight taunt. Mihawk didn't look at Guion but glanced at Dak, who pretended not to see. Indeed, Mihawk wasn't ashamed to admit his defeat. He was never a man to fear failure. So much for the world's greatest swordsman, Guion said, arms crossed, chin up. At that moment, Dak realized there was definitely some tension between them, which wasn't hard to guess. Gon, known as a great swordswoman within the Marines, and Mihawk, a renowned swordsman among pirates, likely had encountered or even clashed swords at sea. I'm not yet the world's #1. Besides, why does my defeat make you so pleased? Doesn't that just make you seem weaker? Mihawk questioned Guion, puzzled. Indeed, Dak listened intently to their conversation, finding it thrilling. Although Mihawk was less talkative in the original story, it didn't mean he couldn't dish out insults. He had mocked Zoro for not being able to defeat a baboon, even though Zoro immediately proved him wrong. Guion began, but Darkray's return interrupted them, and a temporary truce was called. If you don't mind, please enjoy some of our shop's beverages, Dak said, taking what Darkrai brought from him. Bored blue root granules. Why would such a thing even exist in the world of pirates? Dak's face froze, wondering when he had purchased such an item. Was he really going to serve this to his guests? Dak. Darkrai shrugged innocently. He hadn't found anything drinkable in Dak's room, and had brought this as a makeshift solution. Bon, please prepare these 2 packets of supreme luxury bored blue root granules for our guests, Dak said, passing the granules to Bon with a stiff smile. No need. Forget it. Both Mihawk and Guion declined almost simultaneously. While bored blue root granules might be harmless, they certainly weren't necessary. Well then, let's discuss business. Mr. Mihawk, since you arrived first, we'll deal with your matter first. Ms. Guion, is that all right with you? Dak quickly changed the subject, eager to move on. It's nothing, just bored and decided to look around, Mihawk said nonchalantly, surprising Dak. Mihawk had come to the hatchery on a whim, seeking something to do other than nap or sail. Discovering the intriguing mystery hatchery, it made sense for him to visit. Of course, welcome. Now, Ms. Guion, do you have any business here? Dak asked Guion with a forced smile. If I'm not mistaken, Vice Admiral Tsuru or Fleet Admiral Sengoku must have sent you with a message for me. Dak's remark piqued Mihawk's interest, who looked curiously at Guion. Guion, initially reluctant to speak in Mihawk's presence, decided there was no point in hiding her question. We want to know your stance if the Pokémon that leave here become pirates, and we have to take action against them. Guillaume's query caused Mihawk to frown, as he too had only just considered the implication of his actions against marine Pokémon potentially souring relations with the mystery hatchery. Oh, there's no need to worry. As long as the Pokémon isn't harmed or betrayed by its owner, we at the mystery hatchery won't interfere. They choose their own paths, actions, and futures, and we won't involve ourselves in any of it. How you deal with regular pirates should be how you deal with them. That clarified Guillaume's concern. This principle was based on the norms from the Pokémon world. If a Pokémon commits wrongdoings, it should be punished just like any person would be, without any special treatment due to being a Pokémon, but rather treated as an independent life form. All right, I understand, Guillaume responded, seemingly relieved by Dak's answer. Mihawk also seemed to relax slightly, his concern lessening with Dak's clarification. End of Chapter 24. Chapter 24. Afterward, the atmosphere inside the store suddenly became quiet. Dak and the others glanced at Guillaume and then at Mihawk, creating an awkward scene for a moment. How about this? Since both of you are here with nothing particular to do, why don't you help me find a suitable look for Darkrai? Dak felt that continuing like this wouldn't do.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.